Chapter 727. The humble prince sighed. It was quite funny that the Thunderblaze dynasty couldn't even find a successor for the throne. In fact, the Thunderblaze dynasty was so powerful that the person sitting on the throne didn't have to be smart or hardworking. As long as the person didn't waste money and was an honest emperor, the Thunderblaze dynasty didn't need the emperor to do anything. However, people like King An and King Hui weren't worthy of the throne. The best of them were directly excluded from the list of candidates by the late Emperor Lei Qingjun. Therefore, it was very awkward. The humble prince regretted agreeing to let Lei Qingjun go crazy. Otherwise, he wouldn't have to do anything. He could continue to cultivate in seclusion and explore the metaphysical realm. That was what he really wanted. Otherwise, he could have sat on the throne decades ago. Now, the humble prince only wanted to find someone who could sit on the throne peacefully and not cause any trouble. Just when he was having a headache, he and Heavenly Master He Yen suddenly stared at each other. They were both ethereal realm cultivators. One was the commander of the Dark Thunder Guards, and the other was a prince who didn't care about the throne at all. However, the two of them had such expressions on their faces. It was obvious that something big had happened. Everyone felt that something was wrong. Some of them secretly wondered if the mysterious metaphysical realm cultivator had made his move again. The cultivators in the basilica looked outside the basilica at the same time. Their eyes were filled with shock, including Ling Shiqi. They could clearly feel that there were more than 30 bursts of powerful spiritual energy outside the basilica like a volcanic eruption. Even the atmospheric energy was being stirred up. Ling Shiqi and the others rushed out of the basilica. They saw more than 30 figures standing in the air and looking down at them. They were all ethereal realm cultivators. Everyone secretly gasped. Since when did ethereal realm cultivators become so common? What kind of force could have so many ethereal realm cultivators? What were they trying to do by breaking into the palace? The humble prince looked at those people with a sullen face. He couldn't figure out how so many Sky Origin stage cultivators could get into the royal capital without being noticed by the array. He only knew that if those people attacked together, the entire royal capital would be in ruins by now. Heavenly Venerable Black Flame recognized them one by one. Elder Bu from the wonderful 10,000 Laws sect, the high priest of the wizard tribe, the sect master of the purgatory demon sect, the sect master of the divine dueling mountain, the vice pavilion master of the blood cloak pavilion, the palace master of the sky expanse palace, the supreme elder of the ultimate saber hall, the sect master of the evil heart sword sect, the mountain sea sect's pavilion master Huang, the alliance master of the Five Flags Alliance. Every time he said a name, the hearts of the others would beat violently. These people were the leaders of the top sects on the world sect ranking. They were also the strongest. Each of them would cause a commotion if they appeared alone. But now, all of them had appeared at the same time. This kind of status and strength gave people a pressure that was difficult to describe with words. Even many masters of Gang's spirit realm found it hard to breathe and blacked out. They couldn't believe what they had seen. Ling Shiqi also found it hard to believe. Those ethereal realm cultivators were all powerful figures. He had seen some of them and was familiar with some of them. Elder Bu of Wonderful Sect had been here at Lei Qingjun's birthday banquet. At that time, he was watched by 8 masters of the Imperial Hall of Worship. He must have been furious. Head Huang of Mountain Sea Sect had shown up when the Phantom Spirit's secret land was opened. He even used his own power to maintain the entrance of the secret land. As for Ink Frost Ghost, the deputy head of the blood-robed pavilion, he was even more so. At this time, Ink Frost Ghost secretly transmitted a message to Ling Shiqi. Ling Shiqi, seize this opportunity. Ling Shiqi's eyes narrowed. What does Ink Frost Ghost mean? Then, the masters of the Imperial Hall of Worship finally arrived. When they saw so many ethereal realm cultivators, they were also shocked. These experts from the Imperial Consecration Hall were used to being high and mighty. But now, they were facing 2 times their number of experts. Among them were the sect leader and grand elder. Even the Imperial Consecration Hall couldn't withstand it. The humble prince looked at Elder Bu who was standing in the front. What do you want to do by breaking into the palace? Elder Bu snorted, "What do we want to do?" Lei Qingzhua, you really know how to play dumb. 1 year ago, you were really awe-inspiring when you destroyed dozens of sections. But do you know that the imperial capital of the Thunderblaze dynasty can disappear from the world at any time? Leng Shiqi looked at the ethereal realm cultivators in the sky and finally understood. These masters came from various top sections. 90% of the top sects in the Thunderblaze dynasty were here. The only reason they came here was to deter. It could also be said that they came from the spirit cultivation sect's counterattack. 1 year ago, Lei Qingzhua destroyed 3 top sects and dozens of first-rate sects in a fit of anger, shocking the world. Originally, everyone thought that the spirit cultivator sects in the Thunderfire dynasty would be afraid of being beaten and would be well-behaved. But they miscalculated. Now, all the top sects in the Thunderblaze dynasty, except for the Jadefall Island near the Eastern Sea, had secretly joined forces to break into the palace. One had to know that these top sects didn't get along well with each other. Yet, they could disregard their former enmity and directly break into the palace. It could be seen that the Thunderblaze dynasty had forced them into a corner. Looks like you all came with ill intentions. The humble prince's tone also turned cold. Elder Bu was even more unyielding. So what if they come with ill intentions? I really want to know what the Starfall dynasty and Northern Wei dynasty will do when all the experts of the Imperial Consecration Hall of the Thunderflame dynasty and all the courtiers and generals in the Imperial capital are dead. Hearing this, the humble prince's face turned gloomy. The officials below were even more shocked. If they all died, the Thunderblaze dynasty would definitely fall into an unprecedented state of weakness. The Starfall dynasty and Northern Wei dynasty naturally wouldn't let go of such a good opportunity. At that time, they would definitely mobilize their troops to attack. The few Heaven Origin realm experts at the border would definitely not be able to defend against the joint attack of the 2 dynasties. The Thunderblaze dynasty was in danger. No one would have thought that the spirit cultivation sects would be such a threat to the Thunderblaze dynasty. How did you all come in? The humble prince shouted angrily, almost losing his composure. The Thunderblaze dynasty had naturally been on guard against these Heaven Origin realm experts. Otherwise, it would be terrible if they came to cause trouble for no reason. Therefore, there were a large number of high-grade formations near the imperial capital. As long as an expert above the Heaven Origin realm approached, they would be discovered. But where did they come from? At this moment, the void suddenly shattered into a pitch-black hole. An old man with white hair and a youthful face walked out. With the Sky Amplification Palace Lord here, those formations are nothing. The humble prince immediately felt confident when he saw this old man. He immediately greeted respectfully, "Old Man Xiao." This old man was the Thunderblaze dynasty's mystic comprehending realm expert. Once he appeared, the Imperial Consecration Hall and the civil and military officials finally heaved a sigh of relief. With Old Man Xiao here, there would definitely be no problem. Many people also looked at the Sky Amplification Palace Lord. The Sky Amplification Palace was also one of the top 7 sects in the world. It was known for its formations. With him taking action, it was indeed possible to pass through the Thunderblaze dynasty's formations and directly enter the imperial capital. However, in the next moment, 6 different colored spirit lights suddenly flashed in the sky. The terrifying throbbing caused the Heaven Origin realm experts' expressions to change. A middle-aged man in a purple robe walked out of the spirit lights with an ancient aura. It was as if he had transmigrated from the ancient times. He smiled and said, "Old Man Xiao, long time no see. You're still alive." Old Master Xiao frowned and said, 6 Directions Spiritual Supremacy. Chapter 728. The 6 Directions Spirit Realm was one of the 4 Saint Spirit Realms, and this 6 Directions Spirit Sovereign was the current ruler of the Spirit Realm. He was also a Tongxian realm expert. Old Man Xiao and the shoddy prince's hearts sank. These spirit cultivator sects had even invited a 6 Directions Spirit Sovereign. From the current battle strength, the Thunderfire dynasty was actually at an absolute disadvantage. It could be seen that they were extremely resentful towards the Thunderfire dynasty, and the shoddy prince also knew that it was impossible for them to be kind today. His eyes turned golden, and the origin energy around him shook. You can even invite the reclusive Six Directions Spirit Sovereign out of seclusion. You guys are quite capable, but don't even think about threatening my Thunderfire dynasty. Six Directions Spirit Sovereign said, even now, you're still so strong. This is also your Thunderfire dynasty's usual attitude towards spirit cultivator sections. You can't blame others for today's disaster. Ling Shiqi's eyes moved slightly. This matter was actually predicted by Lei Haoyan a year ago. The spirit cultivator sects would retaliate against the Thunderfire dynasty sooner or later, but no one expected it to come so early. And the timing was also very good. It was when the Thunderfire dynasty's throne was empty and power was scattered. Other than that, Crown Prince Lei Haoga was also assassinated by Ling Shiqi. So, let alone the throne, there was not even a crown prince. If today's battle really turned into a river of blood, the Thunderfire dynasty would not gather their strength to fight against the enemy. Instead, there would be internal strife for the throne first. No one wanted to see such a situation. If Ling Shiqi could think of this, so could the shoddy prince and the others. But the shoddy prince was still so strong. From this, it seemed that the Thunderfire dynasty had indeed formed a strong stance against spirit cultivator sections. This was already imprinted in their bones. The only one who could see it clearly, Lei Haoran, was stripped of his status as a prince and imprisoned for life. At this time, the palace lord of the Yen Palace said, Lei Qingjue, the heavenly Thunderfire annihilation formation of the imperial capital is a supreme level formation. Unfortunately, the formation core, the heavenly Thunderfire pearl, has been sealed by your own people. I'm afraid that the spiritual energy inside will leak out. Now, it will take time to remove the seal. This little bit of time is enough to make you die without a burial ground. Then, he suddenly shouted, Formation. Immediately after, dozens of Sky Origin stage cultivators formed a complicated formation with Six Directions Spiritual Sovereign as the center. In an instant, the weather changed, and the entire imperial city darkened. Specks of light intertwined to form a cage, completely trapping the imperial palace. Just the thought of using a Tongxian realm expert as the core of the formation and numerous Heaven's Origin realm experts as the formation flags was terrifying. Old Man Xiao immediately pointed at the void. Immediately, the space cracked and cracks spread out. However, Six Directions Spirit Sovereign waved his hand, and the golden light from his primordial spirit soared into the sky. In the blink of an eye, all the spatial cracks had been smoothed out. Old Man Xiao, I heard that you managed to enter the mystic comprehending realm by comprehending a sliver of the law of space with the help of an external object. However, the law of space was easily erased by me. Looks like the rumors are true, Six Directions Spiritual Sovereign mocked. Old Master Qiao was expressionless and did not reply. He had already lost to Six Directions Spiritual Supremacy in a probing exchange of blows just now. If they were to really fight, he would not have any advantage either. This way, the 30 or so Heavenly Yuan stage cultivators from the Spirit Cultivators sect would be able to unleash their anger without restraint. The Imperial City would definitely be destroyed. Old Master Qiao hurriedly transmitted his voice to the shoddy prince. Let's listen to their conditions and stall for time. Quickly send someone to bring the Heavenly Thunderfire Pearl and activate the Heavenly Thunderfire Annihilation Formation. The shoddy prince understood. He raised his head and looked at Six Directions Spiritual Sovereign. Fighting to the death with the Thunderfire dynasty will not benefit you at all. Even if the dynasty declines or even perishes, before that happens, we will drag you down with us. Today, this king admits defeat. Tell me your conditions. The moment these words were spoken, many of the ministers below were unwilling. If the Thunderfire dynasty gave in this time, there might be a next time. Furthermore, the Thunderfire dynasty could no longer suppress those spirit cultivator sects like they were doing now. However, they were suppressed by the aura of the Heavenly Yuan stage cultivators to the point that they did not even dare to breathe loudly. No one dared to say a word. Six Directions Spiritual Sovereign and the rest laughed lightly. If you had said so earlier, there would have been no need to make things so tense. We only have one condition. Disband the Discipline Commission and the Dark Lightning Guards, and we will retreat immediately. Impossible. The shoddy prince rejected immediately. The Discipline Commission intimidated all the Spirit Cultivator sects, and the Dark Lightning Guards were the strongest intelligence network of the Thunderfire dynasty. They were equivalent to the right-hand men of the Thunderfire dynasty. Disbanding the Discipline Commission and the Dark Lightning Guards was no different from cutting off one's own arms. Lei Qingjue, this sovereign is not discussing with you. Six Directions Spiritual Sovereign shook his head and said, if you agree, we will retreat. If not, we will massacre the imperial capital. Suddenly, a coiling dragon spear appeared in the shoddy prince's hand. This was one of the rare level 8 earth weapons of the Thunderfire dynasty, the Imperial Might Coiling Dragon Spear. Then let's try it. Elder Bu of the mysterious 10,000 Laws sect took out his spiritual sword and pointed it at the shoddy prince. Last time, you stopped me. Let me see how powerful the Thunderfire dynasty's inherited cultivation technique is. The Imperial Might Coiling Dragon Spear in the shoddy prince's hand roared furiously. Instantly, the sky was dyed golden. Waves of power that looked down on the world descended, and a corner of the array that was set up in mid-air was torn apart by him. Elder Bu was surrounded by an illusory light. He pointed his spiritual sword, and the colored glaze illusion turned into a dreamland. At the same time, layers of arrays that were thousands of feet long flashed behind him. The origin energy of heaven and earth vibrated and turned into a 9 heavenly lotus. As the two heaven origin realm experts fought, Heavenly Master He Yen immediately set up a thick layer of black flames to protect everyone. Ling Shiqi observed the battle carefully. Judging from the movements, the shoddy prince and Elder Bu's cultivation was definitely stronger than the old man and Lin Yuanliang's. They were not just borrowing the origin energy of heaven and earth. They were also infusing their own understanding of the heavenly Tao. The shoddy prince shook his spear, and a dragon roared. A golden dragon jumped out. At the same time, a god of war holding a spear that was thousands of feet tall appeared behind him. This was his cosmic form. Once a heaven origin realm expert used his cosmic form, it meant that he had used all his strength. As the spear stabbed out, the void trembled. Along with a huge wave, the 9-colored lotus was shattered. At the same time, the shadow of a giant bear appeared between heaven and earth. Sun Tiangan, the chief commander of the patrol guards, also made his move. Monarch Cloud Shuttle, the chief commander of the Discipline Commission, opened his mouth slightly. A strange fog instantly covered the entire palace. Even the senses of the heaven origin realm experts were suppressed by it. The rest of the experts from the Imperial Hall of Worship and the Spirit Cultivator sects also made their moves. One cosmic form after another appeared in the palace, and the origin energy of heaven and earth within hundreds of miles became violent. There was only one person who was an exception. He was the Deputy Pavilion Master of the Blood Robe Pavilion, Black Frost Ghost. He hid his body directly. No one present could find him, including Old Man Xiao and Six Directions Spirit Elder. The power displayed in front of them was strong, but the heaven origin realm assassin hiding in the dark was even more terrifying. This made the experts from the Imperial Hall of Worship feel even more pressure. This was the terrifying part of the Blood Robe Pavilion. At the same time, the weather in the imperial capital was completely chaotic. Thunder, wind, and earthquake happened one after another. It was like the end of the world, and it made people tremble in fear. Especially when no one knew what was going on. This kind of unknown terror made people panic. Of course, the most chaotic place was inside the palace. There were dozens of heaven origin realm experts confronting each other. It was a shocking scene, especially Old Man Xiao and Six Directions Spirit Elder. With them as the center, the space around them was constantly shattering. No one dared to get close to them. A shocking battle was about to happen. Chapter 729. The number of Heavenly Origin Realm cultivators on the Thunderfire dynasty's side was much lesser than the Spirit cultivator sects. Furthermore, the Heavenly Origin Realm cultivators could not be determined by numbers alone. Regardless of the realm, there was a difference in strength. The Thunderfire dynasty's Imperial Hall of Worship sounded grand, but most of the people inside were recruited by the Thunderfire dynasty. Some of them were rogue cultivators, some had enmity with the Starfall dynasty and Northern Wei dynasty, and some were nurtured by the Thunderfire dynasty themselves. For example, Heavenly Venerable Black Flame, Monarch Cloud Shuttle, and the others were like that. When they left their positions as Dark Thunder Guards and Discipline Division's Great Commander, they would also enter the Imperial Hall of Worship. Therefore, the strength of the experts in the Imperial Hall of Worship was uneven. On the Spirit Cultivator sect side, they were either sect masters, or Grand Elders. They enjoyed the highest status and resources of the top sects, so their strength definitely surpassed the Imperial Hall of Worship. In fact, the few Heavenly Origin Realm cultivators on the Thunderfire dynasty's side already had thoughts of escaping. The reason why they were still here was because they were waiting for the Thunderfire Heaven Punishing formation. As long as the formation was activated, they would have a chance of winning. The shoddy prince shouted sternly, "Even if you are very strong, you should be careful of losing a few teeth if you want to swallow us. All of you are the leaders of your sections. Once you die, what will happen to your sects? Maybe the people standing beside you will swallow your sections." Six Directions Spirit Sovereign said coldly, "Lei Qingjue, don't try to sow discord. I know you are stalling for time. I will ask you one last time. Do you agree or not?" The shoddy prince fell silent. His expression was extremely stiff. As a Heavenly Origin Realm cultivator, he felt so uncomfortable because Six Directions Spirit Sovereign and the others gave him too much pressure. Strictly speaking, his decision today would even affect the rise and fall of the Thunderfire dynasty. Leng Shiqi was also guessing what decision the shoddy prince would make. Regardless of whether he agreed or not, it would be an extremely heavy blow to the Thunderfire dynasty. At the same time, Leng Shiqi could not help but curse inwardly. The Thunderfire dynasty actually did something stupid like sealing the Heavenly Thunderfire Pearl. They clearly knew that the Heavenly Thunderfire Pearl was the formation core of the Thunderfire Heaven Punishing formation. Wasn't the formation used to prevent accidents from happening? But now, the Thunderblaze dynasty had fallen into such a huge disadvantage because they had not been able to activate the formation immediately. Six Directions Spiritual Elder naturally would not believe the Emperor so easily, hand over the Discipline Commission and the Dark Thunder Guard's Great Commander, the 4 punishment envoys, the 4 chiefs, and the higher-ups. As for the distribution of the various states and counties, I will deal with it myself later. The Emperor turned to look at Black Flame Heavenly Lord and Cloud Shuttle Sovereign. Their expressions also turned serious. Six Directions Spiritual Elder's intention was very clear. He wanted their lives. Of course, they were not willing to give up their lives. No matter how loyal they were to the Thunderflame dynasty, their lives were still their own. As Sky Origin Realm cultivators, they could hold great power anywhere in the world. There was no need for them to die for the Thunderflame dynasty. The Emperor's lips moved slightly. He was communicating with Black Flame Heavenly Lord and Cloud Shuttle Sovereign through telepathy. Six Directions Spiritual Elder was getting impatient. He suddenly snapped his fingers. A bright green light suddenly appeared. The void froze and everything was destroyed. In the Imperial Hall of Worship, several Sky Origin Realm cultivators were hit by a heavy blow. Their blood splattered everywhere. Master Qiao was a little slower. It was too late for him to make a move. It was obvious that Six Directions Spiritual Elder was indeed more powerful than Master Qiao. With just a snap of his fingers, Six Directions Spiritual Elder was able to severely injure several Sky Origin Realm cultivators. If a fight really broke out, how many people would be left in the Imperial Hall of Worship? The Emperor made up his mind. Just as he was about to hand over a few people to buy some time, a man walked out from the crowd. It was Leng Shiqi. Leng Shiqi flew into the sky with 4 wings on his back. He laughed wildly, Hahaha, Sky Origin Realm Cultivators and Tongxian Realm Cultivators. How impressive. I am Lu Xingji, one of the 4 great managers of the Dark Thunder Guards. If you want my life, then come and take it. But even if I die, I will tear off a layer of your skin. Boom. Immediately after, Ling Shiqi transformed into wild demon blood beast body and indestructible Vajra divine art. He held the 1,000 illusion sword in front of his chest, as if he was facing death calmly. His actions instantly shocked everyone. This wasn't because of his strength, but because of his courage. At a time like this, there was still someone who dared to stand up for the Thunderflame dynasty against dozens of Sky Origin Realm cultivators. Among them, there was even a Tongxian Realm cultivator, 6 Directions spiritual elder, who could destroy the world. Furthermore, Ling Shiqi's cultivation was only at the unity of heaven and man realm. This kind of cultivation was simply too weak in front of those cultivators. But he still stood up. Just this courage alone made the experts of the Imperial Hall of Worship feel ashamed of their inferiority. It also made many people from the Spirit Cultivator sect sigh that there were still talents in the Thunderflame dynasty. Heavenly Venerable Black Flame, Monarch Cloud Shuttle, the Emperor of Humble Governance, and Old Man Xiao all looked at Ling Shiqi with complicated expressions. The Emperor of Humble Governance clapped his hands and said, "Good, good, good. What a loyal and courageous man." As expected of an important official of the Thunderflame dynasty, as expected of one of the 4 great managers personally appointed by the late emperor. How can I hand over such a person? Even if we fight to the death today, my Thunderflame dynasty will accompany you to the end. Chapter 730. Ling Shiqi's actions were inconceivable to some people, but it also ignited the blood of a portion of the Thunderblaze dynasty's people, igniting their endless fighting spirit. Even 6 Directions spiritual sovereign could not help but take a second look at Ling Shiqi. In his eyes, Ling Shiqi was as weak as an ant, but his fearless courage moved 6 Directions spiritual sovereign. Being fearless is a good thing, but unfortunately, you did not recognize your own strength and the situation you are in. If you were a disciple of my 6 Directions spiritual region, I would definitely nurture you well. What a pity, 6 Directions spiritual sovereign said regretfully. Then, he stretched out a finger, and a mysterious divine energy gathered. He was going to kill Ling Shiqi with his own hands. It was a great honor to have this Tongxian realm expert, the region lord of 6 Directions spiritual region, personally kill someone in the unity of heaven and man realm. Fight, the humble prince suddenly shouted. He raised his dragon spear, and a divine dragon descended, wanting to save Ling Shiqi. Old Man Xiao was also about to make a move, but at that moment, a thick brilliance suddenly filled the sky above the 9 heavens. Waves of strange energy spread out, and all the Heaven Origin Realm experts who were hovering in mid-air immediately felt the origin energy of heaven and earth sink. Then, they fell to the ground one by one. The dozens of Heaven Origin Realm experts from the Imperial Family's Hall of Worship and the Spirit Cultivator sect looked up at the sky at the same time, their eyes flashing with astonishment. The only thing that could stir up the origin energy of heaven and earth and force everyone to fall was the power of law, which was above the origin energy of heaven and earth. At that moment, they felt waves of gravity pressing down on them. The gravity was not very strong, but they could not even think about flying. Only a Tongxian realm expert could have this kind of power. In the Imperial City, other than Old Man Xiao and 6 Directions spiritual sovereign, there was a 3rd Tongxian realm expert. 6 Directions spiritual sovereign immediately stopped. He and Old Man Xiao frowned deeply. They did not notice that there was another Tongxian realm expert nearby. This mysterious Tongxian realm expert had suppressed dozens of Heaven Origin realm experts before he even appeared. The power he displayed was too shocking. They did not know what this mysterious expert's intention was, and which side would he stand on. If he stood on the side of the Thunderflame dynasty, today's disaster would be resolved. One more Tongxian realm cultivator was too much of a threat to the Sky Origin realm. It could be said that it was a dimensional attack. There was no suspense, so the Spirit Cultivator sect had no chance of winning. If this Tongxian realm cultivator stood on the side of the spirit cultivator sect, even if the Thunderflame dynasty activated the Thunderflame heaven punishing array, it would be useless. That was what the humble prince was most worried about. Not long ago, they had speculated that the person who killed Li Juecheng and Lei Haoge was a powerhouse at the metaphysic-reaching realm who had cultivated the law of gravity. Now, there was indeed such a person. From the looks of it, that mysterious expert had a grudge with the Thunderflame dynasty. The shoddy prince's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. As the saying goes, when it rains, it pours. The Thunderfire dynasty was already exhausted from dealing with the counterattack of the spirit cultivator sect. On top of that, there was also a Tongxian realm expert who was coincidentally targeting them. The Thunderblaze dynasty was truly unlucky to have both sides working together. The shoddy prince was already considering whether to use the Thunderblaze dynasty's final trump card. As long as they used that trump card, they still had a chance of winning. However, once they used it, the Thunderblaze dynasty's thousands of years of accumulation would be used up by more than half. Six Directions Spirit Sovereign also wanted to know the purpose of this mysterious expert. He raised his head and said, "I don't know when this Tongxian realm expert who cultivates the law of gravity appeared. Why don't you show yourself? Perhaps we have the same purpose today. Perhaps we can work together." "Not really." A heavy voice rang out from above the clouds. "The Thunderblaze dynasty's fate is not over yet. Your actions will not have any results. If you stop now, you will be less affected by karma." When this sentence was said, the people below had different reactions. The spirit cultivator sect instantly felt that something was wrong. From what they heard, this mysterious Tongxian realm expert seemed to want to help the Thunderblaze dynasty. If that was the case, they would miss the chance to join forces and force the Thunderblaze dynasty to submit. The shoddy prince and the others were like drowning people who had grabbed onto a life-saving straw. However, they were also very confused. This mysterious expert had killed Li Juecheng and Lei Haoge, so he definitely had a grudge against the Thunderblaze dynasty. However, why was he standing on the Thunderblaze dynasty's side now? This was a really messy account. However, the shoddy prince would naturally not let go of such a good opportunity. He hurriedly said, "Senior, if you help the Thunderblaze dynasty tide over this crisis today, you will definitely repay me generously in the future." Old Master Qiao also said, "As long as you delay them a little, when the Thunderblaze heaven punishing formation is activated, these people will not be a threat." This time, it was the Six Directions Spirit Sovereign and the others' turn to be gloomy. They had already wasted a lot of time, and the Thunderblaze heaven punishing formation could be activated at any time. Once the formation was activated, even without the help of the mysterious expert, the Thunderblaze dynasty would be in an invincible position. At most, they could destroy the imperial capital. However, they could not damage the Thunderblaze dynasty's vitality. Perhaps some of them would be killed here. Six Directions Spirit Sovereign knew that the situation had completely reversed. They had become the anxious party, and with every passing moment, their lives would be in danger. He was unwilling to accept this. "Who exactly are you? Why are you helping the evildoers?" However, the mysterious expert only replied with one word, "Karma." "Karma? What bullsh** T karma?" Six Directions Spirit Sovereign suddenly shouted angrily without caring about his image. The four saint spiritual regions have been stagnant for tens of thousands of years because of the rumored karma. However, I do not believe in karma, nor do I believe in fate. I will lead the Six Directions spiritual region to break all karma. Everything in the world is predestined. Some things can't be forced. Let's stop. The arrow has already been knocked on the bow. Anyway, we have already come this far. I am also very interested in your strength." Six Directions Spirit Sovereign's body flashed with flowing light, causing the Heaven Origin stage cultivators to not dare to look directly at him. His battle intent reached the 9 heavens. Who else but him? The mysterious expert only said one word again, "It's too late." Not good. The Sky Amplification Palace Master's expression changed. There is a terrifying force under the palace that is about to erupt. The Thunderfire Heaven Punishing Formation is about to be activated. Old Man Xiao flipped his hand, and a series of explosions could be heard in the air. Spatial cracks as thick as an arm actually severed the formation that the Heaven Origin stage cultivators had set up. The Sky Amplification Palace Master shouted, "Spirit Sovereign, the situation is over. Let's take advantage of the fact that the Thunderfire Heaven Punishing Formation has not been fully activated and leave quickly." Six Directions Spirit Sovereign hesitated. If not for the mysterious Tongxian stage cultivator appearing out of nowhere, he would have already killed all the higher-ups of the Discipline Commission and the Dark Thunder Guards. After that, he would cause the various powers to completely uproot their branches in every county. This way, his reputation would reach the peak. At that time, he would only need to wave his arm and all the spirit cultivator sects in the world would definitely submit to him. He would be able to easily lead the various large sects and become a superpower that could surpass the Thunderfire dynasty. This was his true plan. However, all of this would be in the hands of this mysterious expert. He was filled with hatred and anger, but he also knew his own situation. If he did not retreat now, they would definitely suffer heavy losses. Instead, the reputation of the Six Directions spiritual region would fall to the freezing point, and he would no longer have a chance. A sharp killing intent flashed across Six Directions Spirit Sovereign's eyes. "I don't care who you are. Since you keep talking about karma, then your appearance has also infected yourself with my karma. The next time we meet, you will die, and I will die." Finally, he looked at the shoddy prince. The Thunderfire dynasty has good fortune, but this is only the beginning. Let's go. Shortly after, Six Directions Spirit Sovereign waved his hand, and layers of divine light broke through the gravitational space. The 30-odd Heaven Origin stage cultivators that the Spirit Cultivator sects had joined together turned into streams of light and flew away. Chapter 731. Seeing this, the humble prince, Old Man Xiao, and all the other officials felt relieved. The unexpected disaster had ended in an inexplicable way as if they were in a dream. The humble prince cupped his hands toward the sky and said politely, "May I know your name, senior? Today, you saved the Thunderflame dynasty from disaster. We will definitely repay your kindness." There were only 7 people in the mystic comprehending realm in the world. However, there was one more out of nowhere. The humble prince wanted to know who this person was. If the humble prince guessed correctly, this person might have killed Li Juecheng and Crown Prince Lei Haoge. There was no comparison between saving the Thunderflame dynasty and killing the 2 people. However, the humble prince was curious as to why a mystic comprehending realm cultivator would kill Li Juecheng and Lei Haoge. The voice came from the sky, "Everything is caused by karma. I'm just following the path of karma." In the end, the voice gradually disappeared as if it had gone far away. "Karma, it's karma again. Old Man Xiao, what's the karma he's talking about?" The humble prince was confused. Old Man Xiao looked at the sky as if he wanted to see through the world. He said faintly, "I'm not sure about the path of karma. It involves the origin of heaven and earth. What this person is looking for is much more profound than what I'm looking for. If I'm not mistaken, Li Juecheng and Lei Haoge were killed by this person. Those 2 people might be affected by some karma." Even Old Man Xiao could not explain it clearly. The humble prince was even more confused. Fortunately, the result was good. The situation just now was truly a matter of life and death, and the Thunderfire royal dynasty would have been consigned to eternal damnation. Fortunately, Ling Shiqi had stepped out and delayed for a few breaths of time. Afterward, that mysterious expert had appeared and intimidated the other experts. Only then was the Thunderfire Heaven Punishing Formation ready, and they had finally forced Six Directions Spirit Supremacy to retreat. At the thought of this, the humble prince turned to look at Ling Shiqi. He did not hide the admiration and satisfaction in his eyes. Ling Shiqi, who was in the unity of heaven and man realm, dared to face so many heavenly origin realm masters and Six Directions spiritual sovereign, who was in the mystic comprehending realm. Not only did he show his fearless courage, but he also showed his absolute loyalty to the Thunderflame dynasty. If he didn't nurture such a talent and put him in an important position, he would be blind. The undemocratic king raised his voice and said, "Continue to activate the heaven-destroying Thunderfire formation to prevent Lord Six Directions from attacking us. The rest of you, return to the main hall for a discussion." Buzz! A gigantic formation with a radius of 100 miles appeared. Instantly, red and purple colors filled the sky, enveloping the entire inner city of the imperial capital. This was the supreme formation that the Thunderflame dynasty was proud of, the Thunderflame heaven-annihilating formation. If the array was fully activated, it would be able to summon lightning and fire. Even a Sky Origin stage cultivator would not be able to withstand it for long. Seeing that the Thunderfire heaven-punishing array was finally activated, the people in the hall who were still in shock finally calmed down. Especially those civil officials who had no cultivation base. They almost suffocated under the spiritual pressure of so many Sky Origin stage cultivators. If not for Empyrean Blackflame protecting them, these people would probably have long perished. The undemocratic king knew how dangerous the process was. He first comforted the people and said, "Those top sects actually joined hands to attack the imperial palace. No one expected that. Fortunately, the crisis is over. You can rest assured now. Moreover, the imperial capital has the protection of so many powerful cultivators from the imperial hall of worship and loyal officials like Lu Xingji." Just like what the mysterious ethereal stage cultivator said, the Thunderflame dynasty is very lucky. Speaking of this, he looked at Leng Shiqi and said, "Lu Xingji, when Lord Six Directions forced me to hand over the Dark Thunder Guards and the higher-ups of the Discipline Commission, I did hesitate. However, your appearance made me determined to fight to the death with them. Even if I die, I will protect everyone's lives." Looking at the undemocratic king's excited expression, Leng Shiqi immediately said with a strong sense of righteousness, "I will pledge my loyalty to the Thunderflame dynasty. I will pledge my loyalty to the Thunderflame dynasty." The other civil and military officials were all very excited. After going through such a great disaster, it was rare for them to be united. Lu Xingji, the late emperor, made an exception and chose you as the chief steward of the Dark Thunder Guards. You've made a great contribution this time. I won't mistreat you. The undemocratic king was full of praise for Leng Shiqi. Leng Shiqi, on the other hand, was secretly laughing. In fact, he did not do anything. All he did was to say a few nice words. He did not make any great contribution. However, what he did showed the undemocratic king his loyalty. That was why the undemocratic king decided to put him in an important position. Of course, if it was someone else who rushed up like this, they might have been killed by Lord Six Directions with a slap. Leng Shiqi dared to rush up because he had his own trump card. His trump card was the mysterious ethereal stage cultivator. Leng Shiqi was not good at foresight. It was impossible for him to know that an ethereal stage cultivator was nearby and would help him. In fact, the so-called ethereal stage cultivator was actually Leng Shiqi himself. To be more precise, it was his soul double. Not long ago, when the Ink Frost Ghoul and Leng Shiqi were communicating through telepathy, he guessed that the Ink Frost Ghoul would secretly save him after he stepped up. That was how he would be treated now. However, Leng Shiqi would not hand his life over to the Ink Frost Ghoul. What if the Ink Frost Ghoul failed to save him? Therefore, an extremely crazy idea flashed through his mind. He immediately exchanged for a magical item from the system store. It was the soul double. The soul double was actually a duplicate of Leng Shiqi's soul. It was equivalent to having two souls, each of which was himself. The mysterious ethereal stage cultivator was actually Leng Shiqi in disguise. He had formed a godly soul when he broke through to the unity of heaven and man realm. Even without a physical body, he could survive in the outside world for a long time. He secretly released his soul double and used the law of earth to cover his aura. Then, he used the law of gravity to intimidate the elites. That was how he was mistaken for an ethereal stage cultivator. The moment Leng Shiqi's soul double appeared, forcing the ethereal stage cultivators to fall to the ground was already the limit of what he could do. It seemed like a great deterrent, but in fact, it did not cause any harm to the elites. It was just that the ethereal stage cultivators subconsciously thought that it was an ethereal stage cultivator who attacked, so they were mentally defeated. Leng Shiqi's actions were naturally risky. If Six Directions Spirit Sovereign attacked him directly, he would be exposed. Therefore, he did not attack again after that. He even used the word karma to show that he was unfathomable so that others would not dare to test him. As long as he could delay until the heaven-destroying thunderfire formation was activated, he would succeed. Fortunately, everything was going according to his plan, and the result was the best. Now, not only was Leng Shiqi placed in an important position, but he was also blamed for killing Li Juecheng and Lei Haoge. Therefore, he no longer had any worries. To be able to toy with 2 ethereal stage cultivators and dozens of ethereal stage cultivators in the palm of his hand, Leng Shiqi was bold and crazy enough to do it. Of course, all of this was based on the premise that he had comprehended the law of nature in advance. Otherwise, even if he had the system, it would be useless no matter how bold he was. The humble prince pondered for a moment, then said, "Lu Xingji, you have not been one of the 4 chiefs for long, so you must not be in charge of many provinces. From now on, the 9 eastern counties of the Thunderfire dynasty are under your supervision, and I grant you the power of acting Grand Commander." Chapter 732. The Emperor gave Leng Shiqi 2 rewards. The first was the right to supervise the 9 counties in the east of the Thunderblaze dynasty. In fact, this was the right that Leng Shiqi should have, but it was divided by the other 3 Grand Managers. The others didn't think much of it, but Grand Manager Hai and Grand Manager Shinta didn't have it easy. Before coming to the palace, they had each given Leng Shiqi a county. It was like cutting a piece of meat. Now, they were going to spit out what they had swallowed earlier. As for the second reward, everyone was shocked. What did it mean to be the acting chief commander? Apparently, Lord Botched Governance was going to let Leng Shiqi be the chief commander of the Dark Thunder Guards. When Leng Shiqi's strength and experience were enough, Heavenly Venerable He Yen would probably give up his position. However, judging from Leng Shiqi's performance today, he did have the potential to become the Grand Commander, so no one said anything. "Thank you, Your Highness," Leng Shiqi said politely. "You deserve it." The Emperor smiled, but his muscles were stiff when he smiled. He probably hadn't smiled for a long time. He continued, "Although we survived a crisis today, we also found many loopholes in the imperial capital's defense. We also know that the sects in the world are so powerful." The Emperor's tone became more and more serious. This time, the sects gathered more than 30 Sky Origin Realm cultivators, but they didn't send all of their experts. For example, the mysterious 10,000 Laws sect had 9 Sky Origin Realm cultivators, the Blood-Robed Pavilion had 5, and the 6 Unity Spiritual Region had even more. If all the Sky Origin Realm cultivators from these top sects came, even the Thunderblaze Heaven-Slaying Array would be useless. Old Man Xiao also said, "There are so many top sects in the various counties of the dynasty. How did they team up within a year? Don't forget that there are great grudges between some of these sections. It's unbelievable for them to team up." "Old Man Xiao, you're saying that there's something behind their teamwork?" The Emperor was enlightened. "That's right. So, the Thunderflame dynasty has to be vigilant." Emperor Zhuozhen's eyes flashed, and he immediately ordered, "Call back all the Sky Origin stage powerhouses outside. From now on, the heaven-destroying Thunderfire formation must be maintained by 4 Sky Origin stage powerhouses at all times. We can't let anyone sneak into the royal capital. Also, the restrictions on the Heavenly Thunderfire bead need to be changed as well. Otherwise, the Heavenly Thunderfire Annihilation formation will take too long to activate. This formation hasn't been used for over 1,000 years, so it can't be activated like today." Everyone deeply agreed with this point. If the Thunderfire Heaven Punishing Array could be directly activated today, how could there be so many problems? Lastly, there is one more if, and that is to establish the Crown Prince. This matter could not wait any longer. There were many ordinary people in the huge Thunderblaze dynasty, and they were also the foundation of the dynasty. If no one ascends the throne, I'm afraid that the people's hearts won't be stable. Speaking of this, the humble prince glanced at the crowd. However, the problem was back to the original one. No one was suitable for the throne. Even if he wanted a puppet emperor, he had to at least look like one. At this moment, Ling Shiqi stepped forward and said, "Your Highness, I have a candidate in mind." "Let's hear it." Emperor Zhuozhen smiled when he saw someone speak, and it was Ling Shiqi. "I think there is a prince who can succeed the throne. This person is the eldest son of the late emperor, and he has countless outstanding military achievements. He is also in the unity of heaven and man realm. He is the eldest prince, Lei Haoyan." Ling Shiqi spoke out the candidate in his mind. When Lei Haoyan was mentioned, Emperor Zhuozhen frowned. A year ago, when Lei Qingjun passed away, Lei Haoyan had rashly broken into the palace. At that time, Emperor Zhuozhen personally removed Lei Haoyan's status as a prince and imprisoned him for life. However, now that Ling Shiqi recommended Lei Haoyan to succeed the throne, Emperor Zhuozhen was not happy about it. However, he still asked patiently, "Since Lord Lu recommended Lei Haoyan, you must have your own reasons." "Your Highness, I know that Lei Haoyan is a bit impulsive, but he has something that all the other princes don't have. It is something that an emperor needs," Ling Shiqi explained. "Oh? What is it?" Emperor Zhuozhen was not the only one who was curious. "It is foresight, foresight." Ling Shiqi said seriously, "Your Highness and everyone else should still remember what Lei Haoyan said when he broke into the palace a year ago." Now that he mentioned it, everyone finally remembered that Lei Haoyan said that the Thunderflame dynasty was too aggressive towards the spirit cultivator sections. What the late emperor did before his death not only did not scare off the spirit cultivator sects, but it also aroused their hatred and anger, and even threatened the rise and fall of the Thunderflame dynasty. At that time, everyone present felt that Lei Haoyan was worrying for nothing, and they also felt that he was too young. However, wasn't everything that had happened today exactly as Lei Haoyan had predicted? It was just that Lei Haoyan did not expect the spirit cultivator sects to counterattack so quickly. It seemed that Lei Haoyan's unique foresight was indeed amazing. Just from this point alone, he did have the potential to be an emperor. But then again, Lei Haoyan was originally the candidate that everyone liked. Unfortunately, with the late emperor's will, who could make an exception and make Lei Haoyan the crown prince? Therefore, Emperor Zhuozhen fell into silence. He also knew that Ling Shiqi was right. Lei Haoyan's foresight could be said to be further than everyone else. However, rules were rules, and they could not be easily broken. Ling Shiqi continued, "Your Highness, I know that the late emperor stripped Lei Haoyan of his right to succeed the throne when he was still on the throne. However, if Lei Haoyan was already the emperor of the Thunderflame dynasty, he would definitely have taken precautions against the revenge and attacks of the spirit cultivator sections. Even if what happened today happened again, he would not have let us be in such a sorry state and let a Tongxian realm expert change our fate. I think that such an emperor is enough to break some of the so-called rules. Your Highness should know best which is more important." After a while, Emperor Zhuozhen nodded deeply and said, "You are right. Lei Haoyan's foresight alone is worthy of the throne. I think that my brother's spirit in heaven will not blame me. After all, whether the Thunderflame dynasty has a good emperor or not is very important." The other officials looked at each other. They could see that Emperor Zhuozhen had made up his mind. They immediately shouted together, "Your Highness is wise. It is really the fortune of the Thunderflame dynasty." Emperor Zhuozhen did not care about the flattery of everyone. He said to Ling Shiqi, "This matter is settled. Lei Haoyan was recommended by you, so you will go and announce the decree on behalf of me." "Your Highness, Your Highness." Ling Shiqi laughed in his heart. He had finally waited for this opportunity. A great opportunity was right in front of him. Chapter 733. The humble king asked Ling Shiqi to deliver the imperial edict, which was a great favor to Lei Haoyan. After all, Lei Haoyan was still under house arrest. Lei Haoyan would definitely remember who saved him and gave him the throne. If the future emperor remembered the favor, then it would be a big deal. Prince Ying's palace was the residence of the eldest prince, Lei Haoyan. However, Lei Haoyan was stripped of his position as Prince Ying after he came out of Sky Scar. A year ago, he was even stripped of his status as a prince. From then on, he would be alone for the rest of his life. Prince Ying's palace used to be luxurious and majestic, but now it looked lonely and withered. Even the ground in front of the gate was covered with fallen leaves. It was obvious that no one had cleaned it for a long time. Now, there were only a few old servants left to take care of Lei Haoyan. Naturally, they could not take care of such a huge residence. At this moment, Lei Haoyan was sitting on the ground. His originally masculine and mighty figure was now dejected. His beard and hair were messy, and his eyes were cloudy. Empty wine jugs were scattered around him, and his body exuded a strong smell of alcohol. There was a stooped old eunuch standing next to Lei Haoyan. He looked worried, but he did not try to persuade him, because persuasion was useless. Drinking to drown his sorrows might not be a bad choice. Lei Haoyan was an expert at the unity of heaven and man level anyway. This little bit of alcohol would not hurt him. What made Lei Haoyan so dejected was his sadness. Not long ago, when the imperial capital was in turmoil, some color appeared in Lei Haoyan's eyes. However, he just sneered and continued to drink his wine. Cha-cha, Ling Shiqi walked on the path of Prince Ying's palace. He stepped on a thick layer of fallen leaves and came before Lei Haoyan. "You are Lu Xingji," the old eunuch exclaimed. He knew that Ling Shiqi was now one of the 4 chiefs of the Dark Thunder Guards, but what was he doing here at this time? The old eunuch suddenly thought of a possibility. He immediately shouted, "Don't even think about harming His Highness. His Highness has such a loyal servant by his side," Ling Shiqi lightly said. The old eunuch was only at the spirit transformation realm. Ling Shiqi could kill him with a single glance. Lei Haoyan glanced at Ling Shiqi, then took a big gulp of liquor and coughed several times. "It seems that my time is up." In his opinion, the Dark Thunder Guards had always dealt with some shameful matters. Lei Haoga was about to ascend the throne, and as the first prince, he definitely couldn't stay. The news of Lei Haoga's death was only known to the upper echelons of the Thunderfire dynasty. It had only been a day since Lei Haoga's death, so Lei Haoyan didn't know and thought that Ling Shiqi was here to kill him. Ling Shiqi shook his head. "Does your highness not want to live anymore?" This was not the majestic First Majesty from Void Scar Sky. "There's only hope as long as you're alive, isn't there?" Lei Haoyan's eyes shifted. "You weren't sent by Lei Haoga to kill me?" "Lei Haoga? He doesn't have the right to order me around." "Oh, I almost forgot. There doesn't seem to be a Lei Haoga in this world anymore." Ling Shiqi slapped his forehead as if he just remembered this. Lei Haoyan suddenly raised his head. His eyes were filled with shock as if he had discovered something incredible. Ling Shiqi had called out Lei Haoga's name without any hint of respect in his tone. Normally, he should be addressing Lei Haoga as Crown Prince. That wasn't all. What did Ling Shiqi mean by the second half of his sentence? What did he mean by there was no Lei Haoga in this world anymore? Although Lei Haoyan already understood, he still couldn't believe what he had heard. He still asked, "What do you mean by that? How could the Crown Prince not be in this world anymore? If you're here to make fun of me, please leave. Did I not make myself clear enough? Also, I'm not so bored as to make fun of your highness. I just want to tell your highness to hurry up and tidy up. You can't be the Crown Prince like this. Otherwise, during the Ascension ceremony, not only will your highness lose face, but the Thunderflame dynasty will also lose face." With that, Ling Shiqi took out a golden imperial edict. The light from the edict made Lei Haoyan squint his eyes. "By the will of the heavens, the emperor decrees, Crown Prince Lei Haoyan to enter the Eastern Palace and choose a day to ascend the throne." By the emperor. Lei Haoyan was stunned. The old eunuch next to him was so shocked that his jaw almost fell to the ground. He even slapped himself twice. He thought he was dreaming. Your Highness, no, Your Highness the Crown Prince, please accept the edict. Ling Shiqi handed the imperial edict forward. Lei Haoyan was stunned for a moment. Then, his eyes burst out with a shocking light. He received the imperial edict with trembling hands. He carefully looked at the imperial jade seal imprint on it. Only then did he believe that everything was true. Ling Shiqi turned his eyes and said, I have something to say to Your Highness the Crown Prince. Eunuch, please leave. The old eunuch immediately jumped and said with a face full of surprise, This old servant will leave, this old servant will leave. Lord Lu, please go ahead. At this moment, Lei Haoyan was still carefully touching the imperial edict. This was something he had always dreamed of. He never dreamed that this thing that was not fated to him would fall into his hands in the end. He had experienced many ups and downs. His state of mind had also undergone drastic changes. At this moment, he had gone from great sorrow to great joy. Little did he know that this was also the time when a person's state of mind was the weakest. Ling Shiqi's mind moved. 8 ghost slaves appeared. Suddenly, the surrounding aura was completely isolated. Lei Haoyan's eyes flashed, but he didn't care too much. He thought that Ling Shiqi really had something to say to him. Then, another Ling Shiqi suddenly appeared beside Ling Shiqi. However, that Ling Shiqi was only the size of a 7 or 8-year-old child. That was Ling Shiqi's soul avatar. Lei Haoyan asked doubtfully, Lu Xingji, if you have something to say, just say it. I will remember your favor. Of course, a favor is not enough for me to give Your Highness the Crown Prince such a big gift. Ling Shiqi said with a smile, but there was a hint of sinister in his smile. Lei Haoyan was not too surprised. He did not have much contact with Ling Shiqi, but he had heard that he was a greedy person. What do you want? I want you. As soon as Ling Shiqi finished speaking, 6 mysterious vortexes appeared behind him. Each vortex flickered with a multicolored light. In an instant, Lei Haoyan's eyes lost their luster, and his consciousness had already been dragged into the glass samsara realm. He would go through 6 rounds of reincarnation in a row. Every time he went through a round of reincarnation, a part of his consciousness would be wiped out. This was an illusion created by Ling Shiqi when he visualized the 6 paths of reincarnation in the underworld. It was the glazed reincarnation mirror, a rank 7 spiritual skill, dream glazed glass, and his comprehension of the 1,000 revolutions fantasy world. Not to mention that Lei Haoyan's state of mind was fluctuating greatly and had long been unstable. Even if he was in a normal state, he would not be able to last more than a few rounds. His consciousness would eventually disappear completely, leaving only a shell. Perhaps only a spirit caster who had condensed a primordial spirit could survive 6 rounds of reincarnation. But even so, after experiencing 6 rounds of reincarnation, would you still remember who you were? These 6 rounds of reincarnation might take decades or centuries for a reincarnator, but in reality, it was only a matter of a few breaths of time. So even if he made it through, he would be muddle-headed and at the mercy of others. This was the terrifying part of the glass samsara realm. And the reason why Ling Shiqi wanted to wipe out Lei Haoyan's consciousness was because of his body. It could also be said that he had taken a fancy to his identity. The Crown Prince's identity. Chapter 734. Ling Shiqi's soul doppelganger was not only used to scare people, but it also had a more important use, which was to possess someone. When he attacked the 1,000 Illusions Sword sect, he saw the 1,000 Illusions Sword elder possess Wei Qian's body, which was a reminder to him. After obtaining the soul doppelganger and scaring off 6 Directions spiritual elder and the others, he had his own plans. He wanted to use the soul doppelganger to possess a prince. From there, he could indirectly sit on the throne of the Thunderstorm dynasty. However, this goal was not so easy to achieve. First of all, he could not be disturbed during the possession process, let alone be discovered. Especially since Ling Shiqi had never possessed anyone before, it might take a long time. Therefore, the prince that he wanted to possess could not have any experts protecting him. Among the many princes, Lei Haoyan was the most pitiful. He was stripped of his status as a prince and there were only a few old servants in Prince Ying's residence. Lei Haoyan naturally became Leng Shiqi's best target. Other than that, he also had his eyes on Lei Haoyan's powerful cultivation, physical body, and purple crystal frost flame. If he possessed Lei Haoran or Lei Haoyan, he might succeed and sit on the throne. However, Leng Shiqi, who was used to controlling power, naturally hoped that his soul doppelganger would not be too weak. There was another difficulty in possession. When he killed Lei Haoga, he found that Lei Haoga, as the crown prince, already had a treasure to protect him. If not for Leng Shiqi's comprehension of the law of gravity, he might not have been able to kill Lei Haoga. Therefore, Leng Shiqi had to possess a prince before he became the crown prince. In this way, Lei Haoyan was the most suitable candidate. A year ago, Lei Haoyan had predicted that the spirit cultivator sect would take revenge, which could be considered as helping Leng Shiqi. At this moment, Lei Haoyan's consciousness had been hooked into the glass reincarnation realm by Leng Shiqi. In his first life, he was born as a little beggar, suffering all kinds of humiliation and suffering. His most common sentence was, "I'm the crown prince, I'm the emperor." However, what he received was endless mockery and bullying. When he was in his teens, he starved to death on the streets. Before he died, he still said, "I am the crown prince, I am the emperor." The second life was even worse. Lei Haoyan was reincarnated as a stray dog. He froze to death by the roadside after living for less than 2 years. His eyes were filled with confusion. In his third life, he was finally born into a normal family. At first, he could still vaguely remember who he was. But as time passed, he slowly grew up, got married, had children, raised children, and finally died of old age. It was a peaceful and happy life. The Prince Ying's palace, which was still desolate yesterday, suddenly became the most lively place in the imperial capital. It was a kind of irony. Unfortunately, none of them could see Lei Haoyan, because he announced to the public that he was not feeling well and needed to rest for a few days. He would not see anyone. Others thought about it and agreed. Lei Haoyan was originally a useless prince. Once the new emperor ascended the throne, he might be eliminated. From such a precarious situation, he suddenly became the crown prince, and was even preparing to ascend the throne. It was not easy for anyone to recover, so it was normal for him to adjust his mentality. In fact, this was just the soul avatar adapting to this body. Not only did he need to learn Lei Haoyan's habits, speech, and movements, he also needed to adapt to Lei Haoyan's own strength. Lei Haoyan had the cultivation of one with the world, and he had also refined the purple crystal frost flame. He needed time to regain control of these things. The soul avatar also went into seclusion for a few days. There was a pleasant surprise. Lei Haoyan's cultivation technique was extraordinary. He cultivated the Thunderfire dynasty's Yang technique, which only the direct descendants of the Thunderfire dynasty's royal family had the qualifications to come into contact with. This technique was comprehended by the Thunderfire dynasty's ancestors from the Thunderfire Heavenly Pearl, and it was abnormally fierce. Especially if one could refine the fire or lightning variants, its power would be multiplied. In terms of rank, it could be called a 9th-tier cultivation technique. Lei Haoyan had already cultivated the Thunderfire Yang technique to the 7th layer, and he was only one step away from the 8th layer, which was the Heaven Origin realm. This technique had developed lightning and fire to the extreme. It just so happened that Leng Shiqi lacked a powerful fire attribute cultivation technique, and his use of the Crimson Gold Earth Dragon Flame was still superficial, which could make up for it. No one would have thought that the Thunderfire dynasty's crown prince, the future emperor, was actually Leng Shiqi. Chapter 735. When Leng Shiqi returned to the headquarters of the Dark Thunder Guards, everyone looked at him differently. Today, Leng Shiqi could be regarded as the favorite of the king of poor governance. He not only had the right to supervise the 9 provinces, but also had the right to be the acting commander. In the past, when the commander was absent, the 4 directors took turns to take charge of the affairs. But now it was different. As long as the commander was absent, Ling Shiqi would be in charge of the Dark Thunder Guards. It was known that the commander, Lord Black Flame, was not in the imperial capital most of the time. This meant that Ling Shiqi had unknowingly become half a commander. Ling Shiqi had reached such a high position in the headquarters of the Dark Thunder Guards not long after he came. How could the Dark Thunder Guards not be shocked? Now, in the Dark Thunder Guards, anyone who saw Ling Shiqi still felt a little incredible. Some seniors still found it hard to accept, thinking that Ling Shiqi was not worthy of his position. There were also some young people whose eyes were full of worship and admiration. Ling Shiqi had become their goal and role model, and they couldn't wait to join him immediately. On this day, there were more than 60 people sitting in the conference hall of Xingji Pavilion. What was terrible was that 70% of them were masters in the realm of oneness of heaven and men. There were 9 people sitting in the front. They were the 9 deputy directors who belonged to Ling Shiqi. Ren Yi was sitting in the first row. The rest were all supervisors, who were in the early stage of oneness of heaven and men and in the late stage of Gang Spirit Realm. Generally speaking, those who could become supervisors in Gang Spirit Realm were all young people who needed to be trained by the Dark Thunder Guards. After Ling Shiqi came in, everyone said in unison, "Greetings, General Director." He glanced at the crowd and found something very interesting. 30 to 40% of the masters present were old men with white hair and beard. It seems that this is a place for them to retire. He thought to himself, but he was still very kind on the surface. Don't be so polite. I never like any red tape. Everyone here only needs to abide by one rule, and that is absolute obedience to me. At this point, the 1,000 Illusion Dao sword appeared in Ling Shiqi's hand and then disappeared. Instantly, sword threads as thin as hair intertwined and formed a sword formation above everyone's heads. This was something that Ling Shiqi imitated from the 1,000 Illusion Swordmasters battle. Later on, he cultivated the 1,000 Illusion Sword Codex and had the 1,000 Illusion Dao sword in his hand. He could also use the sword silk formation like the 1,000 Illusion Swordmaster. Of course, in terms of power, he could not compare to the 1,000 Illusionary Swordmaster. After all, the 1,000 Illusionary Swordmaster possessed Wei Qiyan and was at his peak. However, it wasn't a problem to use it to intimidate these Unity of Heaven realms. The sitting masters immediately felt as if their backs were pierced by the sword Qi. The spiritual power contained in the sword Qi made these oneness of heaven and men realm experts tremble. Some inner supervisor of Gang Spirit Realm were so scared that they broke out in cold sweat. Everyone was secretly sweating in their hearts. As the saying goes, a new broom sweeps clean. Even though this was the first time Chief Steward Lu had gathered the upper echelons of the 9 provinces, it seemed that he wanted to establish his authority. This was within everyone's expectations. However, what was unexpected was the power displayed by Ling Shiqi. At that moment, someone familiar with him secretly transmitted a message. Didn't Lord Lu just break through to the oneness of heaven and men realm not long ago? Why is he so powerful? Didn't you notice that he is already in the middle stage of the oneness of heaven and men realm? He should have broken through from the Gang Spirit Realm to the middle stage of the oneness of heaven and men realm. It can be seen that his power is incredible. This is just his cultivation. What makes me more amazed is his power. This sword formation doesn't seem very complicated, but condensing the sword into threads can only be done by sword cultivators in the oneness of heaven and men realm. In addition, he has the 8th level earth weapon, the 1,000 Illusion Dao sword in his hand. Just based on this, I'm afraid that he is not weaker than the other 3 chief stewards. His progress is too amazing. He has reached this level in only about 3 years. If he is given a few more decades, what kind of realm will he reach? That's why I said that you should put away your little thoughts and follow this master well. In the future, you will be able to achieve great success with just a little bit of light. Ling Shiqi saw that everyone's expressions were different and knew that they were secretly transmitting a message. He said, I don't have any other meaning. I only have one sentence. Since you are following me, you have to do things according to the way of Xingji Pavilion. I will not care about your little calculations. As long as you do your part well, I will not treat you unfairly. Everyone understood that Ling Shiqi's hand was giving a sweet date after a slap. They said together, this subordinate obeys. All right, let's all do our own things. There is one thing to pay attention to, and that is to keep an eye on those spirit cultivator sects at all times. Especially the top sects. Ling Shiqi finally reminded them. Those top sects had failed to attack the palace this time. They would not give up so easily, so they had to keep a close eye on them. Following that, Ling Shiqi dismissed everyone. He was preparing to take care of some matters. After all, during his closed-door cultivation, he had accumulated some information that he needed to look through personally. But right at that moment, the Ink Frost Ghost Man's voice sounded out again. Midnight, east of the imperial capital. The Ink Frost Ghost Man's voice only said a few words before disappearing. Ling Shiqi opened his supercilious eye, and all the spirit energy within 100 li of him could be seen clearly. After breaking through to the unity of heaven and man realm and condensing his soul, his supercilious eye's range of observation had reached 100 li. However, he still did not see the Ink Frost Ghost Man's chi. This meant that the Ink Frost Ghost Man was not in the imperial capital. He did not know what method he used to transmit his voice to Ling Shiqi. Ling Shiqi's finger lightly tapped on the handle. The Thunderfire Heaven Punishing Array had just been closed, and the Ink Frost Ghost Man dared to transmit his voice. Was he not afraid of being detected by the imperial capital's array formation? It had to be said that the Ink Frost Ghost Man's concealment technique was superb, and he was very bold. Since the Ink Frost Ghost Man had taken the risk to stay near the imperial capital, it meant that he had something important to discuss with Ling Shiqi. He guessed that the Ink Frost Ghost Man wanted him to do something for the Blood Garment Pavilion. Then, he left an illusion in his secret room and quietly left the imperial capital. Now, he was no longer the small fry that the Blood Garment Pavilion could manipulate. Even if he had to face the Vice Pavilion Master of the Blood Garment Pavilion alone, he had enough confidence. Late at night, Ling Shiqi arrived at the agreed meeting place alone. However, what he saw was not the Ink Frost Ghost Man, but a human-shaped puppet. The puppet spoke in human language, and its voice was very mechanical and stiff. Ling Shiqi, in order to not be detected by the array formation near the imperial capital, I have attached a portion of my spiritual energy to this puppet. Ling Shiqi understood that the Ink Frost Ghost Man had used such a method. With that, he was even more fearless. What instructions does the Vice Pavilion Master have for this disciple? The Ink Frost Ghost Man's words caused Ling Shiqi to listen attentively. The Ink Frost Ghost Man said, "It's time to let you know the real Blood Seed Plan." Chapter 736. The Real Blood Seed Plan. Ling Shiqi had guessed correctly. The Blood Seed Plan did not only consist of him, Delta Origi, Yushu, and Meng Ming. He had always wanted to know how many secrets were hidden in this plan and what was its ultimate goal. The puppet possessed by the Ink Frost Ghostly Man said with a piercing voice, the Blood Seed Plan had actually started 100 years ago. There were some outstanding disciples who were placed in other forces. The sect secretly helped them to climb up the ranks in an attempt to return the favor to the sections. However, it was not easy to become a core member of a force. Ordinary talents could only reach the middle level at most. However, relying on the power of the middle level could not bring about great benefits to the Blood Garment Pavilion. The Blood Seed Plan had reached a bottleneck because of this until the Pavilion Master decided to nurture a true prodigy. Therefore, there was the Blood Mist Island and the four of you. Ling Shiqi understood the origin of the Blood Seed Plan. The plan had been started a long time ago. There were probably many people from the Blood Garment Pavilion in the imperial capital now. However, he still could not guess the purpose of the Blood Seed Plan. What was the so-called breaking the shackles of the Blood Garment Pavilion? The Ink Frost Ghostly Man continued, the Blood Seed Plan has been going on for more than 100 years. We thought it would continue for another 100 years before it could succeed. However, your improvement is amazing. In just a few years, you have become one of the 4 chiefs of the Dark Thunder Guards. Now, you are valued by the Emperor and hold great power. Now, you are qualified to know the true purpose of the Blood Seed plan. When he heard up to here, Ling Shiqi held his breath in concentration. For the sake of this objective, he'd experienced countless storms of blood on Blood Mist Island, and he'd even lost his past memories and experiences. After killing his way out of the Blood Mist Island, he had not stopped for a moment. He had been running around and almost lost his life several times. It was not easy for him to obtain the qualification to know the truth. The Blood Garment Pavilion is one of the top 7 sects in the world. It is one of the top sects and is one of the top sections. The assassins under the Blood Garment Pavilion are feared by countless spirit cultivators. It can be said that they have gained both fame and fortune. However, we are not satisfied with this. The Inkfrost ghostly man's tones suddenly became sharp, revealing boundless ambition. If others had heard this, they would have thought that the Blood Garment Pavilion's higher-ups had lost their minds. The Blood-Robed Pavilion was already a top-notch sect. It had several Sky Origin stage cultivators under its command. The 9 Netherworld Blood-Robed assassins were famous all over the world. Many powerful cultivators had been killed by them. This was already a height that countless people could only dream of. Even if they could reach a fraction of the Blood Garment Pavilion's level, it would be enough for them to smile in the underworld. However, the Blood Garment Pavilion was far from satisfied with this. Wasn't this just looking for trouble for himself? At first, Ling Shiqi also had this idea, but it was just a fleeting thought. The more accomplished a person was, the less satisfied they would be with their current achievements. Ling Shiqi was the same. Logically speaking, he could be considered to have great authority now. He oversaw the 9 eastern counties of the Thunderblaze dynasty and had dozens of Union of Heaven experts under him. He was already a great figure that could cause a commotion with a stomp of his feet. However, Ling Shiqi was never satisfied with the status quo. He was not willing to sit in the position of one of the 4 great chiefs for the rest of his life. Of course, he wanted to continue to climb up and become the commander of the Dark Thunder Guards or even obtain higher authority. In this respect, Ling Shiqi could understand the Blood Garment Pavilion's ambition. Seeing Ling Shiqi's approval, Inkfrost Ghost Man continued, "The Blood Garment Pavilion's strength is not bad, but in fact, it is controlled by others. You haven't been in the sect for long, so you may not have felt it. The feeling of being tied down is enough to drive people crazy. In the eyes of other sects, no matter how strong the Blood Garment Pavilion is, it is just a sword in their hands. They will use it when they need it and abandon it when they don't need it. Those people are afraid of the Blood Garment Pavilion's assassins, but at the same time, they look down on them. After thousands of years of inheritance, the Blood Garment Pavilion has had enough. Therefore, we resolutely decided to change this situation. The Blood Seed plan is to send talented disciples like you into the major forces. When you all succeed in rising to the top, you can secretly bring a lot of resources and benefits to the Blood Garment Pavilion. Most importantly, when the Blood Garment Pavilion rises in the future, it will inevitably be besieged by a large number of sections. At that time, it will be time for you to really show your strength." Ling Shiqi grasped the key point. Rise. What was the Blood Garment Pavilion going to do that it would be besieged by so many sects? In the original plan, we planned to announce to the world in a few decades that the Blood Garment Pavilion will no longer be hidden in the dark and will no longer be a sword in the hands of others. The Blood Garment Pavilion will still be an assassin force, but it will be up to us to decide what kind of assassination missions we accept or not. More importantly, the disciples of the Blood Garment Pavilion, like the disciples of other sects, can go out to gain experience and compete for opportunities. However, in the past thousands of years, the Blood Garment Pavilion has been shouldering too many grievances. Among the sects in the world, from the top sects to the third-rate forces, almost all of their disciples have been killed by the assassins of the Blood Garment Pavilion. The reason why they have not directly retaliated against us is that, first, they are afraid of our strength. Second, everyone tacitly agrees that the Blood Garment Pavilion will not bear grievances. Otherwise, if they lose this sword, it will be difficult for them to do some things. Even so, in recent years, many people have secretly come to the Blood Garment Pavilion to cause trouble. You should have experienced it. Leng Shiqi nodded. When he was still in the spirit transformation realm, he had bumped into the Tang family at the Donglin County branch. The elder of the Tang family had almost killed him. It turned out that this kind of thing was not rare. So, once the sects rise, those forces who resent us will definitely join forces to destroy the Blood Garment Pavilion. In their eyes, since the Blood Garment Pavilion is no longer willing to be the sword, they will change it. When that time comes, the strength of the sects will definitely not be enough to resist them. We will need your strength. The Ink Frost Ghost Man finally revealed the purpose of the Blood Garment Pavilion. Leng Shiqi understood. He knew that the Blood Garment Pavilion would face a disaster in the future, and this disaster was brought on by their own initiative. Of course, the Blood Garment Pavilion would not seek their own destruction, so they came up with the Blood Seed Plan. When these people became the upper echelons of those forces, they would have a lot of power, which would greatly reduce the pressure that the Blood Garment Pavilion had to bear. If a top sect like the Blood Garment Pavilion could not bear it, then it would be fine to add a few more. For example, Leng Shiqi. If he was already the commander of the Dark Thunder Guards when the Blood Garment Pavilion rose, he could have prevented most of the sects in the 9 eastern counties from going against the Blood Garment Pavilion. He alone could have greatly reduced the pressure on the Blood Garment Pavilion. In addition, the Discipline Commission where Delta Origi was, the Ultimate Saber Hall where Yushu was, and the Purgatory Demons sect where Meng Ming was, as well as the people who had participated in the Blood Seed Plan in the past, there would not be many sects that could go against the Blood Garment Pavilion in the end. Under such circumstances, if the Blood Garment Pavilion was still destroyed, it would be purely because of their own lack of ability, and they could not blame anyone else. However, if the Blood Garment Pavilion really passed this stage, it could be said that they had achieved their goal and could finally establish themselves in the world. Without this layer of shackles, the Blood Garment Pavilion would become more prosperous and powerful. Leng Shiqi had to admit that this was an extremely huge plan that would take hundreds of years, the efforts of several generations, and extremely strong patience to successfully complete. He also had to admire the strategy and determination of the Blood Garment Pavilion's upper echelons. Chapter 737. However, Leng Shiqi had a major doubt. Would the people who participated in the Blood Seed Project still listen to the Blood Cloak Pavilion after they became the higher-ups of a force? Leng Shiqi was now one of the 4 great general managers. But, he was no longer in awe of the blood-robed pavilion. Now that he had become the commander of the Dark Thunder Guards or reached the Sky Origin stage, his awe of the blood-robed pavilion had disappeared. When the Blood Cloak Pavilion asked him for help, he might not help them. He did not believe that the Blood Cloak Pavilion had not thought of this. They had planned for such a long time and such an important plan. They could not afford any accidents at the core. It meant that the Blood Cloak Pavilion must have their own backup plan. For example, they might have done something to Leng Shiqi and the others. Leng Shiqi muttered in his heart and said, "I understand. What do you need me to do?" Tonight, the Ink Frost Ghostly Man did not come to him just to chat. The Ink Frost Ghostly Man smiled and said, "There is indeed something I need you to do. In fact, the Blood Cloak Pavilion has been trying to change in recent years. We participated in Lei Qingjuan's birthday banquet and this time, to let the other sects begin to adapt to the Blood Cloak Pavilion standing in front of others. You are already the great manager who oversees the 9 eastern counties, so we are going to let the Blood Cloak Pavilion branch in the 9 eastern counties try to change the rules of accepting missions. This will definitely cause dissatisfaction among the local sections. Maybe they will make a big deal out of it. When that happens, you will have to step in." "I see." Leng Shiqi's mind raced. It seemed that the blood-robed pavilion wanted to use the 9 eastern counties under his control as a test subject. This matter was actually not a big deal. As long as it did not cause public outrage, he could suppress it with his status. However, he still said, "This is a bit troublesome. Deputy Pavilion Master, you know that I have not been in office for long. I have just taken over the supervision of the 9 eastern counties. The deputy managers and eunuchs under me have not been completely subdued, let alone the inspectors and supervisors of the various counties. To put it bluntly, my authority is far from enough. It is better to start this after some time. Moreover, we cannot let several counties do this at the same time. Otherwise, there is nothing I can do if there is an accident. The Inkfrost ghostly being chuckled, "Don't worry, since we've already waited for so long, there's no need to rush. What I just said will be carried out over the next few years, so it won't make things difficult for you. Moreover, the sect won't let you work for free. I know that with your current status, you don't lack ordinary resources. I think this is what you need." At this moment, the puppet possessed by the Inkfrost spectre pulled out a piece of its own structure and handed it over. "This is?" Ling Shiqi asked. "It is a jade slip, but there are some restrictive spells on it. Later, I will tell you the spell to remove the restrictive spells. Inside the jade slip, there are all the experiences we had when we reached the sky origin stage." Ling Shiqi's heart skipped a beat. The experience of breaking through to the sky origin stage. This was something that no amount of resources or treasures could exchange for. How many people in the union of heaven and man realm wanted to advance further but had no one to guide them? Only top-notch sects had these things. Even in top-notch sects, not everyone could get their hands on them. In the Blood Cloak Pavilion, perhaps only the 9 Hades Blood Cloak assassins were qualified. These are only our experiences. They might not be suitable for you, but you can use them as a reference. After you memorize them, destroy the jade slip. Do not spread it out. In addition, you and the Delta Origi are both in the imperial capital. Xiongming is also in Tianshan County. They are under your supervision. It's best if you can help, the Inkfrost ghostly being advised. "Don't worry, Vice Pavilion Master. I understand." Even if the Inkfrost ghostly being did not say so, Ling Shiqi would have done it anyway. It's about time. The Blood Seed project will only begin in a few decades. There's no need for you to rush. You just need to steadily become the Dark Thunder Guard's commander. With that, the puppet in front of Ling Shiqi suddenly disintegrated and exploded into a pile of debris. Ling Shiqi gently waved his hand and crushed the debris into dust. Only then did he feel relieved and leave. In the following month, the imperial capital could be said to be filled with undercurrents. The sudden activation of the Thunderfire Heaven Punishing Formation and the series of shocking changes yesterday made many people realize that something was wrong. However, the Thunderfire dynasty announced that they were improving the formation. Of course, not many people believed it. At the same time, Lei Haoyan became the crown prince and was about to ascend the throne. The various major forces of the Thunderfire dynasty were undergoing a preliminary reshuffle under the orders of the Shoddy Prince. For example, some of the older members of the Dark Thunder Guard had retired, leaving many positions empty. These positions were left for Lei Haoyan to appoint, so they naturally became Lei Haoyan's subordinates. The situation was similar for the patrol guards and the discipline commission. Even the officials who were qualified to take up positions and the upper echelons of the various provinces were transferred. All of this was to prepare for Lei Haoyan's ascension to the throne. There were also many people who took a fancy to the empty positions and fought for them with all their might. During this process, Ling Shiqi was the one who suffered a bit. Because he had many senior subordinates, 30% of the positions were suddenly empty. However, he didn't care. These empty positions would only be filled by stronger people in the future. After all, no one in this world was closer to the emperor than him. Lei Haoyan, or rather, the Lei Haoyan who was possessed by Ling Shiqi's soul avatar, was very busy during this period. He had already started to get in touch with the affairs of the Thunderfire dynasty. Every day, he was full of social activities. The Shoddy Prince was paving the way for him, but he still had to walk the path himself. It was very important to know the right people. At this time, Ling Shiqi's soul avatar sent off the last visitor of the night. The Shoddy Prince then sent someone to invite him into the palace. Soon, Lei Haoyan arrived at the palace. The shoddy prince said seriously, Haoyan, you will ascend the throne the day after tomorrow. There are some things I need to tell you personally. Come with me. Then, the soul avatar followed the shoddy prince through layers of formations and came to a room full of thunderfire energy. There was nothing else in the room except for a stone table in the center. There were a few items placed on it. The soul avatar immediately saw that the thunderfire heavenly bead was one of them. He thought to himself, this must be the place where the most important trump card of the thunderfire dynasty is kept. The shoddy prince walked to the front of the table and said, Haoyan, you have experienced a lot in the past 2 years. These might not be trials for you, but opportunities to train your will and state of mind. I have noticed that you are much more mature than before. You are definitely qualified to sit on the dragon throne. I am very pleased. Uncle. The soul avatar was about to speak but was interrupted by the shoddy prince. I know what you are thinking. After you ascend the throne, I will go into seclusion in the dragon vein. The Thunderfire dynasty will be under your control. However, you still need 2 royal family members to assist you for a period of time. Today, I called you here to tell you the biggest secret of the Thunderfire dynasty. Chapter 738. The soul clone's heart skipped a beat. The shoddy prince was going to tell him all the secrets and trump cards of the Thunderblaze dynasty. The shoddy prince picked up the heavenly Thunderblaze pearl first. You should be familiar with this item. However, there are still some restrictions on the heavenly Thunderblaze pearl. I have decided to remove some of them. At least, the heavenly Thunderblaze array can be activated at any time. You have to do this personally after you ascend to the throne. At that time, you will be the only one in the world who knows how to remove the restrictions on the heavenly Thunderblaze pearl. This is the first thing you have to do after you ascend to the throne. Remember to delay it. The soul clone nodded. It seemed that the shoddy prince wanted him to remove the restrictions and set up new ones. This was exactly what he wanted. Because the Leng Shiqi still had a heavenly Thunderblaze pearl. As long as he knew how to remove the restrictions, the Leng Shiqi would have another treasure. Then, the shoddy prince picked up a palm-sized disc. This is a sound transmission disc. Remember, don't use it unless the Thunderblaze dynasty is about to be destroyed. The soul clone stared at the disc. This thing was related to the survival of the Thunderblaze dynasty. Haoyan, on the surface, we only have one mystic comprehending expert, Old Master Qiao. However, that is not the case. Hearing this, the soul clone was shocked. The Thunderblaze dynasty actually had more than one mystic comprehending expert. However, he was puzzled. If that was the case, why didn't they invite the other mystic comprehending experts over a month ago? If that was the case, 6 Directions Spiritual Sovereign and the others would not be a threat. They would not have nearly forced the Thunderblaze dynasty into a desperate situation. Actually, the Thunderblaze dynasty has 2 more mystic comprehending experts hidden in the dark. The shoddy prince said proudly. However, he then sighed softly. However, these 2 cannot appear as they wish. Why is that? Because they are both in the heavenly tomb. The shoddy prince said in a deep voice, you have been to the heavenly tomb before. That is where the heavenly origin realm experts of the Thunderblaze dynasty were killed. In fact, there are not only heavenly origin realm experts, there are also 2 mystic comprehending experts. The spiritual avatar immediately recalled that he had vaguely seen 2 mysterious figures at the end of the heavenly tomb. Could they be the wills left behind by the Tongxian stage experts? The humble prince continued, the power of the metaphysical realm is beyond your imagination. Even though they are dead, their minds are still alive. However, they couldn't leave the heavenly tomb easily. Otherwise, their souls would be completely destroyed and the heavenly tomb would cease to exist. Furthermore, the 2 of them can't fight for long in their consciousnesses. So, we can only ask for their help when the Thunderflame dynasty is on the brink of death. It turned out that the Thunderflame dynasty still had such a terrifying trump card. As expected, they were not a colossus like the three great dynasties. Their foundation was simply too terrifying. The humble prince didn't stop. He put down the round plate and picked up a golden lock. This is the dragon-resisting lock specially prepared for you. With it protecting you, no one can kill you except for metaphysical realm warriors. Previously, I gave one to Lei Haoga as well. Unfortunately, no one would have thought that a Tongxian realm cultivator would really try to kill him. So, I asked Old Master Qiao to stay in the palace. Try not to leave the palace unless it's an emergency. Originally, the dragon-resisting lock was enough to keep the emperor safe. However, Lei Haoga's death destroyed this guarantee. Therefore, the humble prince had to ask Old Master Qiao to protect Lei Haoyan secretly. However, Old Master Qiao was a Tongxian realm cultivator after all. He wouldn't come here to protect Lei Haoyan. Therefore, Lei Haoyan had to stay in the palace for a long time. Although Lei Haoyan wouldn't have much freedom, it was still better than being assassinated. In the end, the humble prince took out 2 jade slips. One of them recorded the way to activate the Thunderflame heaven-destroying formation. The other one recorded all the contents of the 9th level cultivation method, the Thunderflame Ardent Yang technique. It also recorded the experiences of generations of royal experts who practiced this cultivation method. You are very talented in cultivation and have a chance to reach the Sky Origin realm. Don't be blinded by power. You have to work harder in the future. Thank you for your reminder, Royal Uncle. The humble prince was satisfied that Lei Haoyan didn't show any arrogance even though he was about to ascend to the throne. That's all I have to say. As your royal uncle, I have a gift for you. Speaking of this, the humble prince took out a list. On this list are the young talents I specially selected for you. Every one of them is very useful. Some of them may be inexperienced, but as long as you are willing to train them well, they will definitely be a great help to you in the future. The soul doppelganger opened the list. The first name on the list was Lu Xingji. He wasn't familiar with most of the names on the list. However, the winners of the elite club, such as Delta Origi, Di Chuan, Zhuge Puha, and Wu Diao, were all on the list. The soul doppelganger wanted to test him. He asked, Royal Uncle, this Lu Xingji is ranked first. I don't have much contact with him, but I can tell that he is an ambitious man. Can we really put someone like him in an important position? The humble prince pointed at the list and said, Haoyan, people like Lu Xingji who are easily seen through by others are not that scary. The scary ones are those who look like they have no desires, but are actually ambitious. You can use Lu Xingji as you wish. If he wants power, you can give him power. If he wants resources, you can give him resources. The only thing you can do is to never let him get involved in the royal family. His talent can only be described as monstrous. In the future, he will probably reach the Sky Origin stage and become a great minister. As for him, you don't have to restrict his power. When you feel that you can't control him anymore, you can give him a piece of land. You can even make him a king, as long as you can keep him away from the royal capital, which is the center of power. Hearing this, the soul doppelganger sneered in his mind. It turned out that the humble prince thought so highly of him. The humble prince had already prepared a way to control him. However, now that he knew about this, he could make use of this information to do something. Now that everything is clear, you can go back now. Prepare for the ascension ceremony the day after tomorrow. The humble prince waved his hand. The soul doppelganger bowed and returned to the crown prince's palace. The ascension ceremony was not a small matter. As the crown prince, he had to prepare a lot of things and ceremonies. Soon, it was the 3rd day. It was a day that would be recorded in the history books of the Thunderflame dynasty. The ascension of the new emperor. The royal palace was especially grand and solemn that day. Aside from the royal capital, there were also high platforms set up in all the states. All the high-ranking officials gathered there to pay their respects to the emperor. Leng Shiqi, as one of the 4 chief managers of the Dark Thunder Guards, naturally came to the royal palace to participate in his own ascension ceremony. The auspicious time had arrived. Leng Shiqi's soul doppelganger walked to the main hall step by step in the majestic music. Finally, he turned around and sat on the dragon throne. At this moment, he announced to the world that the new emperor of the Thunderflame dynasty was born. Long live His Majesty! Chapter 739. After the coronation ceremony, Lei Haoyan and the courtiers began the court meeting. Now that the shoddy prince had gone into seclusion at the Dragon Vein, the ones standing at the front were not Prime Minister Mo Linhui, but two white-haired old men with serious faces. These two were relatives of the Thunderfire dynasty's royal family, and they were here to assist the new emperor. Although they were called assistants, they were only a part of it. After all, the new emperor needed advice on how to deal with the country's affairs. However, it was more of an observation to see if Lei Haoyan was suitable to be emperor, and they would make an evaluation of him. Then, the royal family would decide if Lei Haoyan could be a puppet emperor or truly hold power himself. These two white-haired old men could be considered Lei Haoyan's grandfather, and they were Lei Duanyi and Lei Duanhai. They were standing straight and staring at the person on the dragon throne. Leng Shiqi's soul clone knew that as long as he didn't make any big mistakes in the next 2 to 3 years, there would be no problem. Moreover, if he could make some wise decisions, he might be able to take control of all the imperial power in advance. Now, the first thing the new emperor did after ascending the throne was to confer titles and appointments. Some of the courtiers present would be demoted to idle positions, some would retire and return to their hometowns, and some would be promoted. As for what the outcome would be, it would be up to the emperor to decide. This was also why eunuch Gao had spent so much effort to nurture his own forces. Only when his wings were strong enough could he show his value and keep his position as one of the 4 great chiefs. After Leng Shiqi became one of the 4 great chiefs, eunuch Gao knew the result. He would definitely continue to hold on to this position. Although it was possible for the 4 great chiefs to form cliques for personal gain, it showed that eunuch Gao had sharp eyes and had contributed greatly to the Thunderfire dynasty's talents. In particular, Leng Shiqi had been put in an important position by the shoddy prince. Just this point alone was enough to stabilize eunuch Gao's position. Afterward, Lei Haoyan took out an imperial edict, and the old eunuch beside him immediately took it and walked to the front of the stage, reading out the names and positions one after another. Immediately, some people in the main hall were happy, while others were sad. But in the end, they all had to kneel down to accept the decree and express their gratitude. Among them, Delta Origi was also appointed as the deputy executor of the discipline department. Her cultivation was now at the middle stage of Gang's spirit realm, which was a whole realm lower than Leng Shiqi, but her cultivation speed was also amazing. Not long ago, she had completed an extremely dangerous mission and gained a lot of merits. Thus, she caught the attention of the king of poor governance. In addition, Wu Diao, Di Chuan, and Zhuge Puha were all promoted. Moreover, most of the people who were promoted this time were young people. They were to build their own team for the new emperor. At the end of the imperial edict, Leng Shiqi was also appointed as an imperial guard. For his current identity as one of the 4 great chiefs, being an imperial guard with a blade was nothing. However, the key point of this position was not power, but trust. The emperor's trust in him. To a certain extent, this was more important than any reward. Many ministers looked at Leng Shiqi with envy. They could imagine that Leng Shiqi was about to become the favorite of the new emperor, and there were so many benefits. The last appointment was temporarily added by Leng Shiqi's soul doppelganger. As long as he became an imperial guard with a blade, he would be qualified to meet the emperor often without arousing suspicion. Leng Shiqi and his soul doppelganger were telepathic, so there was no need for them to discuss any secrets. However, in this way, it would create an illusion that Leng Shiqi was a favored minister. In the future, no matter what the emperor's soul doppelganger rewarded him, it would not be surprising. The 2 royal relatives, Lei Duanyi and Lei Duanhai, looked at each other. The list on the imperial edict was originally prepared by the king of poor governance, but there was no last item. At this time, the soul doppelganger transmitted a sound to them, elders, before the emperor left, he specially told me that Lu Xingji could be put in an important position. The Emperor has already given Lu Xingji the power of acting commander of the Dark Thunder Guards. I can't think of any other reward right now, so giving him a blade guard is just right. Hearing this explanation, Lei Duani and Lei Duanhai nodded their heads. This way, not only did they give a reward, they also showed the Emperor's love for talent. Furthermore, they did not give Leng Shiqi any real power. It could be said to be killing two birds with one stone. Your Majesty, it's rare for you to be so thorough. Lei Duani also transmitted a sound, his voice filled with satisfaction. After announcing all the appointments, the most urgent and serious matter for the Thunderflame dynasty was how to deal with the spirit cultivator sects. A month ago, 6 Directions Spirit Sovereign and many other experts from the top sects barged into the palace and almost razed it to the ground, causing the Thunderflame dynasty to suffer a great loss. Although they retreated in the end, it was still like a sword hanging over the head of the Thunderflame dynasty. After that, the Thunderflame dynasty also made some moves, such as improving the Thunderflame Heaven Punishing Array. The various Discipline Division and Dark Thunder Guards were all keeping an eye on the various sects, and even some of the combat troops guarding the surrounding borders were mobilized. Even so, the upper echelons of the Thunderflame dynasty were still worried. How could they guard against thieves every night? Rather than blindly defending, they might as well think of other ways. Mo Linhui walked forward and cupped his hands. Your Majesty, this old subject thinks that how to deal with the spirit cultivator sects, especially those top sects, is the most important matter for the Thunderflame dynasty. I hope that Your Majesty can make a decision. Lei Duani and Lei Duanhai both looked at Lei Haoyan on the dragon throne. He had just ascended the throne and had already encountered such a troublesome matter. They also wanted to see how he would deal with it. Lei Haoyan muttered to himself for a moment and said, that day, when the various top sects attacked the palace, I was not there, so I would like to hear your opinion first. A general opened his mouth and said, reporting to Your Majesty, it is impossible for those top sects to always unite. Moreover, there is already enmity between them. This general believes that while they are unable to react, the dynasty will destroy a few top sects with lightning speed like last time. Let them know the consequences of offending the Thunderflame dynasty. Otherwise, do you know that the people who came last time were only the tip of the iceberg of the top sects? Someone immediately refuted him, even if the dynasty destroys a few more top sects, the remaining Sky Origin stage experts will still be several times more than the dynasty. Furthermore, doing so will only expand the conflict between the two sides to the point where they will not rest until one side is dead. This subject thinks that we should first befriend a few of the top sections. As long as we destroy their alliance, they will become a pile of loose sand and no longer be a threat. Let the dynasty lower their voices and curry favor with them? Impossible. The courtiers immediately began to speak one after another. They were mainly divided into two sides, the main ones being in favor of war and the main ones being in favor of peace. None of them could convince the other, and none of them could come up with a method that satisfied everyone. When the courtiers did not have a good idea, Leng Shiqi stood out, Your Majesty, this subject has a suggestion. Chapter 740. Minister Lu, please speak. The Soul Doppelganger gestured, and the others immediately quieted down. Leng Shiqi took 2 steps forward and cupped his fists. Your Majesty is farsighted. A year ago, you predicted that the spirit cultivator sects would counterattack. The truth is indeed so. This humble subject admires you. That's right. The Soul Doppelganger nodded. I have already said that it is impossible to maintain a strong attitude towards the spirit cultivator sects. However, what you said just now is also true. My dignified Thunderflame dynasty cannot bend down to curry favor with them. Therefore, this subject has a plan for Your Majesty. I am listening. Leng Shiqi and the Soul Doppelganger sang a double act. Leng Shiqi extended his index finger and made a 1 gesture. He said in a clear voice, the world's first spirit cultivator conference. With these words, the ministers were all confused. It sounded like he wanted to hold a grand event, but with the title of World's First, it was too big. Everyone looked at Leng Shiqi, waiting for his explanation. I would like to ask everyone, why are the top sects called top sects? Leng Shiqi did not explain. Instead, he asked a question. However, there were still people who answered. There are Sky Origin Realm experts in the sect. There are no less than 10 experts in the Unity of Heaven realm. They are qualified to be called top sections. This Lord's words are not accurate enough. We usually think that the sects on the world's ranking are called top sections. Just as this Lord said, in reality, it is not only the powers on the world's ranking that have this qualification. For example, after the 1,000 Illusionary Sword sect was destroyed, Pinghui Prefecture's 9 Origin Sword Pavilion fought for the title of 8 Desolate Weapons Path. Leng Shiqi spoke endlessly. As for whether or not the 9 Origin Sword Pavilion can enter the world's ranking, the key lies in one power, and that is Wind Whisper Tower. The world's ranking is set up by Wind Whisper Tower. They use their information network to determine whether or not a sect has the qualifications to enter the world's ranking. For example, the 9 Origin Sword Pavilion and other powers are all fighting to enter the world's ranking and become famous. Do all of you understand what I mean? He spoke for a long time, but did not mention what the so-called world's first Spirit Cultivator Conference was. Instead, he talked about the world's sect ranking. If it were anyone else, they would have been confused, but the people standing here were all extremely astute. They also understood the meaning of Leng Shiqi's words. The Falling Star Continent's world sect ranking list listed more than 50 of the strongest sects and forces. The names of these forces were widely known throughout the world. Even ordinary people were familiar with all the top sects and forces. Therefore, whenever a disciple of a top sect went down the mountain to gain experience, it would attract the envy and surprise of countless people. This was also what the top sects were proud of. At the same time, all the top sects never had to worry about recruiting disciples, because every year, a large number of young geniuses would take the initiative to gather, so they could pick and choose. For example, the 1,000 Illusionary Sword sect was already at the bottom of the top sects, but every year, many geniuses would still flock to it. In the end, there was only one word that brought about all of this, and that was fame. Fame and fortune, with fame and fortune, it would naturally bring benefits. Although the officials did not guess the exact method of the world's first Spirit Cultivator Conference, they could still guess that Leng Shiqi wanted to use the name of the Thunderblaze dynasty to bring great fame to the Spirit Cultivator sects and Spirit Cultivators. As the saying goes, one's mouth is soft after eating someone's food. After the Spirit Cultivator sects received the benefits brought by the Thunderblaze dynasty, they were naturally unwilling to become enemies with the Thunderblaze dynasty. Only then did Leng Shiqi explain, Your Majesty, this subject proposes to use the name of the Thunderblaze dynasty to send out invitations and invite all the spirit cultivators in the world to participate in the world's first Spirit Cultivator Conference. From the pure spirit realm to the Sky Origin realm, everyone can participate regardless of status. All the participants are divided into 4 categories. The pure spirit realm and the spirit transformation realm are divided into one category, which is mainly targeted at those young geniuses. The spirit pulse realm and the spirit aperture realm are grouped together, the spirit astral realm and the unity of heaven realm are grouped together, and finally, the sky origin realm is grouped together. At the beginning of the Spirit Cultivator Conference, the selections will be held in each province. Only the top 10 spirit cultivators of each province will have the qualifications to come to the imperial capital. After layers of battles, the number of winners will be determined according to the different categories, and the rankings will be carried out, which is to imitate the world's ranking of sects and set up a ranking. This subject has initially named it the Dragon Ranking, and has drawn up 4 rankings: the Hidden Dragon Ranking, the Wandering Dragon Ranking, the Flying Dragon Ranking, and the Divine Dragon Ranking. The Hidden Dragon Ranking has a total of 108 positions, and only records the 4 realms of Heaven Realm and the young spirit cultivators under the age of 25. The Wandering Dragon Ranking has 72 positions, and they are basically all the best in the Spirit Aperture Realm. The Flying Dragon Ranking only has 36 people, and these are all great experts of the unity of heaven realm. As for the divine dragon ranking, there are only 12 people, and those who can be listed on this ranking are naturally experts of the sky origin realm. Furthermore, the Dark Thunder Guards will use their powerful intelligence network to announce all the names of the dragon ranking to the world in a timely manner. Even if it is a small town or a remote village, it will be announced. If nothing unexpected happens, most of the people on the ranking are disciples of the top sections. As a result, they will immediately become famous. As long as there is a name, there will be more benefits. In this way, those top sects will receive the grace of the Thunderfire dynasty. This subject cannot guarantee that all the top sects will be grateful, but at the very least, more than half of the top sects will not give up this opportunity to become famous, and will definitely repair their relationship with the Thunderfire dynasty. After Lang Shiqi finished speaking, the hall fell into silence. So this was the first Spirit Cultivator Conference. After a long while, Minister Mo Linhui clapped his hands and praised, "Wonderful, wonderful." The first Spirit Cultivator Conference will not only greatly ease the relationship between the Imperial Dynasty and the Spirit Cultivator sects, it will also push the reputation of the Imperial Dynasty to an extremely high point. In addition, during the process of the Spirit Cultivator Conference, it will also bring about huge business opportunities for the various provinces and the Imperial capital. Furthermore, we can use this opportunity to find out a large amount of information about the Spirit Cultivator sects. The benefits are beyond imagination. Hearing Lord Lu's words, this old man is enlightened. This old man admires you greatly. The others immediately agreed. The first Spirit Cultivator Conference proposed by Lang Shiqi could be said to be a brilliant plan within a brilliant plan. Even the two Imperial family elders nodded their heads repeatedly. The sole clone on the dragon throne also praised, but in the end, he changed the topic and said, "Let's do as you say, but we have to add one more thing." After the first Spirit Cultivator Conference ends, the rankings of the various dragon rankings will also be changed. As long as someone can openly challenge someone with a higher ranking, they can replace them. Every month, the dragon rankings will change. What do you think? Chapter 741. All the officials were moved. If the position of the dragon rankings was still being challenged and changed, then the matter would be even more serious. Especially those young geniuses on the hidden dragon rankings. As long as they cultivated some kind of powerful spiritual skill or possessed an even more powerful spiritual skill, their strength would greatly increase. No one was willing to let their ranking drop, and they would think of ways to increase their strength. This was the attraction and magic of the rankings. This way, the conflicts between the Spirit Cultivator sects would also be aroused and expanded. At that time, they would not even be able to deal with their own internal strife, let alone have the time to deal with the Thunderfire Imperial Dynasty. Mo Linhui immediately shouted, "Your Majesty is wise. Your Majesty is wise." All the officials shouted together. Lei Haoyan, on the dragon throne, chuckled, "Not only that, other than the dragon rankings, I also plan to set up a Phoenix Dance rankings. This ranking is not as complicated as the dragon rankings. There are only 108 places, and all of them are the most beautiful women in the world. Among them, the number one is naturally the number one beauty in the world." As soon as this idea was mentioned, the officials immediately exclaimed that it was wonderful. In this world, the things that could easily make people lose themselves were none other than money, power, and lust. As the saying goes, heroes have a weakness for beauties, and beauties are the tomb of heroes. Since ancient times, how many heroes have fallen under the pomegranate skirt of beauties? By setting up the Phoenix Dance rankings and letting the peerless beauties be known by everyone, then the conflicts surrounding these beauties would naturally appear. Furthermore, the Phoenix Dance rankings itself was a bloodless battle. One had to know that sometimes, a battle between women was even more terrifying than a battle between real swords and spears. When the Phoenix Dance rankings appeared, it would definitely cause an endless storm. At this moment, everyone looked at Lei Haoyan in a different light. This new emperor was much more shrewd than they had imagined. The most troublesome matter in front of them had been resolved in a few words, and he had even proposed a few methods to obtain it in one fell swoop. All of them could be said to be excellent, and in a short period of time, they were completely convinced by Lei Haoyan. The two imperial family relatives felt that Lei Haoyan was no longer the same as before. The impetuosity and impulsiveness of the past had disappeared. It turned out that his thoughts were actually so meticulous. He knew all the sects in the world like the back of his hand, and was even well aware of their weaknesses. It was obvious that he had studied the spirit cultivator sects for a long time. It seems that this emperor has chosen the right person, the two elders thought. What do you think about the dragon ranking and phoenix dance ranking? The soul clone asked. At this moment, Lei Duan-yi raised a question. There's nothing else. What I'm most worried about is that there will be a large number of experts entering the imperial city in the near future. That means those sky origin stage cultivators who want to harm the imperial court can come in openly. Their existence is such a threat to the imperial court. The soul doppelganger smiled and said, Elder, you're worrying too much. I'm sure they won't cause trouble in the imperial city, and they wouldn't dare. The imperial court and the top sects had just had an intense conflict, and in the blink of an eye, they had invited spirit cultivators to enter the imperial capital. What would the spirit cultivator sect think? They would think it was a trap. Therefore, the sects that are hostile to the dynasty don't dare to come to imperial capital. Lei Duan-yi nodded thoughtfully and said, Your Majesty is farsighted. All the ministers immediately knelt down. Your Majesty is wise. The world's first spirit cultivator assembly was proposed by Minister Lu. We merely modified it slightly. Since this was Minister Lu's idea, you will have full authority to handle this matter. If you need anyone in the process, you can mobilize them at will. The imperial edict will be issued soon. This subject receives the edict. With regards to the method of dealing with the spirit cultivator sects, there were still a few matters that were neither big nor small to be discussed. After the court meeting ended, Ling Shiqi began to prepare for the world's first spirit cultivator assembly. This matter would involve the mobilization of all 36 provinces and the imperial capital of the Thunderblaze dynasty. There were simply too many things that needed to be prepared. Even though Ling Shiqi already had plans, it still took him a few days to finalize everything. Following which, the Thunderblaze dynasty announced to the world that they would be holding the world's first spirit cultivator assembly. They also released the news of the establishment of the dragon ranking and the phoenix dance ranking. As for the time, the first round of selections for the various provinces and counties was scheduled for 2 months later, and the second round of the imperial capital battle was scheduled for half a year later. Immediately, the entire Falling Star continent was shaken. Especially within the Thunderblaze dynasty, the streets and alleys were filled with intense discussions about the world's first spirit cultivator assembly. Countless people saw a good opportunity to quickly become famous, and there were also people who saw through the scheme behind this. However, even if they knew the intentions of the Thunderblaze dynasty, they still couldn't help but want to participate. It could be said that this was an open conspiracy. I want to participate in the world's first spirit cultivator assembly. I will definitely be on the hidden dragon ranking. A youth in the marketplace raised his head and said, Don't joke around, you. You couldn't even enter a second-rate sect last year, and you want to be on the hidden dragon ranking? I think you won't even be able to pass the first round. In a restaurant next to a few youths. Brother Wang, you and I have been rogue cultivators for more than 20 years. It wasn't easy for us to cultivate to the spirit aperture realm, but we are still looked down upon by those spirit cultivator sections. The world's first spirit cultivator assembly doesn't care about one's background, it only looks at one's strength. We can give it a try. Once we are on the wandering dragon ranking, we will be famous throughout the world. Even if we establish a sect, there will be a large number of disciples following us. That's right, I have the same intention. The upper echelons of the Tang family, a first-rate sect in Donglin County, gathered together. The world's first spirit cultivator assembly is a good opportunity for my Tang family to become famous. In 3 days, there will be a small competition within the family. All the winners will be able to participate. Patriarch, Tang Wanxiu's cultivation has improved very quickly, and her strength is not bad. She might be able to compete for the qualifications to be on the Wandering Dragon ranking. However, she has always been at the back of the mountain and doesn't want to communicate with others. What should we do? It's related to the Tang family's reputation. She can't be willful. The meeting hall of the top sect, the Supreme Saber Hall, was not calm either. Hall Master, forgive me for being blunt, but you can't go. That's right, Hall Master. The sect needs you to personally oversee it. The Hall Master of the Supreme Saber Hall, Fu Yingxi, was full of fighting spirit. You don't have to say any more. I have already decided to participate in the world's first spirit cultivator assembly. My name will definitely be on the Divine Dragon ranking. Seeing him like this, the elders and genius disciples couldn't persuade him anymore. Actually, as the leader of a top sect, he couldn't leave the sect as he pleased, let alone participate in the Spirit Cultivator Assembly of the Thunderblaze dynasty. Don't forget, the Supreme Saber Hall was also among those who attacked the imperial capital a month ago. They were afraid that this was a trap. If something happened to Fu Yingxi, it would be a huge blow to the Supreme Saber Hall. Yushu, who was in the crowd, rolled his eyes and then smiled strangely. At this time, in the Extraordinary Force 6 Directions Spiritual Region, 6 Directions Spiritual Sovereign frowned. He carefully looked at the information about the world's first Spirit Cultivator Assembly in his hand. After a long time, he sighed faintly and said, "Good move, a good move." Chapter 742. The preparations for the world's first Spirit Cultivator Conference were in full swing. The core cities of the various states and counties were packed with people, and the Thunderblaze dynasty was unprecedentedly lively. On this day, a handsome young man walked into Donglin town. He was dressed in a black robe and carried a long sword on his back. He looked quite dashing. He went straight to the entrance of the city lord's mansion. This was also the place to register for the world's first Spirit Cultivator Assembly. It had already been more than a month since the registration began, but there was still a long queue. Although the city lord's mansion had already sent out a large number of people, and there were more than 10 places where one could register, there were simply too many people. This was especially true for youths below the 4 realms of celestial being. There were simply too many to count. The black-clothed youth consciously stood at the back of the group. There were at least 200 people in front of his group. Fortunately, it wasn't too troublesome to register. He estimated that it would be his turn in about 2 hours. The popularity of the world's first Spirit Cultivator Conference is truly unexpected, he muttered. That's right. Someone had appeared behind the black-clothed young man at some point in time. Naturally, he continued the conversation. The black-clothed youth turned around and saw a middle-aged man with a wooden skewer hanging from the corner of his mouth. This person's face was black and his teeth were yellow. When he opened his mouth, one could smell the stench of his breath. However, the black-clothed youth didn't mind. He seemed to be bored and started chatting. "Uncle, are you here to sign up as well?" "Uncle? Do I look that old?" "I'm only a few years older than you," the black-faced man said with a face full of dissatisfaction. As he spoke, he even wiped his face, as if trying to make it look whiter. The black-clothed youth immediately smiled and said, "I was rude. Please don't blame me, big brother." "That's more like it. My name is Su Ji. It feels good to be called big brother. I'm definitely going to befriend you." Su Ji waved his hand with a heroic look. "So it's Big Brother Su, I am." The young man in black paused for a moment before saying his name. "I am Leng Shiqi." That's right, this black-clothed youth was Leng Shiqi. After he had arranged everything for the world's first Spirit Cultivator Conference, there was nothing for him to do for the time being. At the very least, he would be fine until the second round of the imperial capital. Even if there was an accident, there would be someone to take care of it. Ever since he had broken through to the one with the world realm, the teleportation range of his fate's skill had expanded to 5,000 miles. Coupled with the Gu King's wings, he could travel 7 to 8,000 miles in a day at full speed. Of course, Leng Shiqi was not out for sightseeing. He visited all the 9 prefectures as fast as he could, and Donglin County was his last destination. He had 3 purposes for doing this. First of all, he was traveling incognito. He did not reveal his identity when he traveled through the 9 provinces. Instead, he was secretly observing the behavior of the Dark Thunder Guards. Secondly, he wanted to greet the Blood Garment Pavilion branches in the 9 prefectures so that they could also participate in the world's first Spirit Cultivator Conference. Moreover, he also discussed with them the order of changing the Blood Garment Pavilion's mission rules, as well as what they should pay attention to. This matter was requested by the Ink Frost Ghoul, and Leng Shiqi also agreed to it. However, he really did not wish for a big mess to happen within his jurisdiction. As for the third reason, he also wanted to participate in the world's first Spirit Cultivator Conference. Leng Shiqi, as the initiator, could not participate in this matter in principle, but it did not mean that he could not use other identities. Donglin County was the last stop of his trip, and also the first prefecture he had come to after leaving Blood Fog Island. He decided to register in Donglin County. The reason why he did not casually use a fake name, but used his real name in this life, was that he felt that there was no need to be timid. In this world, there were very few people who knew that he was Leng Shiqi. At most, some people in the Blood Garment Pavilion branch in Donglin County had heard of this name. In addition, the Tang family, a first-class force in Donglin County, should also remember this name. After all, Leng Shiqi had killed the genius of the Tang family, Tang Hapu, and was secretly wanted for a period of time. At the mention of the Tang family, killing intent flashed in Leng Shiqi's heart. Since he had come to Donglin County, he did not mind ending this feud and eliminating a hidden danger. Leng Shiqi. Su Ji repeated it twice. This name is a bit strange. Are you the 17th in your family? Brother Su, you guessed it. In fact, I am an orphan. I was adopted by the master when I was young. I am the master's 17th disciple, so I got the name, Leng Shiqi replied. Su Ji touched his head and said bitterly, don't blame me for mentioning your sad story. Leng Shiqi waved his hand. It doesn't matter. Brother Su, you don't have to take it to heart. I see that your cultivation is profound. I wonder which sect you are from. Su Ji raised his head slightly and said with some pride, brother, you can see that my cultivation is profound. You have a good eye. As for the sect, to tell you the truth, there is no sect in the world that can catch my eye. Hearing this, Leng Shiqi did not know what to say. He could see at a glance that Su Ji's cultivation was only in the spiritual pulse realm. And the spiritual energy in his body was very mixed. He could basically tell that he broke through by force. It was already good enough for someone like him to become a deacon elder in a third-rate sect. He was clearly a wandering cultivator with no future, yet he was still showing off. But Leng Shiqi couldn't care less. He was just casually talking to pass the time. Brother Su, you have a heart of mountains and seas. I admire you. You're too kind. By the way, who is your master? Leng Shiqi hesitated and said, I can't casually reveal my master, but I feel like old friends with Brother Su at first sight. I can't bear to lie to you. My master is the Wave Island Sword Monarch. Su Ji was stunned. Not because of anything else, but because he had never heard of this Wave Island Sword Monarch. However, seeing Leng Shiqi's cherished look in the title of Sword Monarch, Su Ji guessed that Leng Shiqi must have an extraordinary background. He cupped his hands and said, Brother, you are the disciple of the Wave Island Sword Monarch? I am so envious. Leng Shiqi laughed in his mind. He didn't just randomly make up the title, Wave Island Sword Monarch. He used it to cover his own identity. The Wave Island Sword Monarch was actually a powerful wandering cultivator from overseas. He was in the Sky Origin stage. It was said that he once sat alone on an isolated island for dozens of years to learn a trace of sword intent. In the end, he reached the Sky Origin stage. On that day, sword will soared into the sky, and waves surged into the sky, directly engulfing that island. That was why he was called the Wave Island Sword Monarch. The Wave Island Sword Monarch had always been a mystery. In fact, according to the Dark Thunder Guards, he had died in a dangerous place. It was just that outsiders didn't know about it. Moreover, the Dark Thunder Guards also collected his corpse and even accidentally obtained a part of his inherited cultivation method. Unfortunately, it was only broken. When Leng Shiqi found out about this, he secretly cultivated the incomplete technique left behind by the Wave Island Sword Monarch and disguised himself as his disciple. The Wave Island Sword Monarch was a spirit cultivator from overseas and had disappeared for dozens of years. As long as the Wave Island Sword Monarch's close relatives didn't appear, Leng Shiqi was confident that no one would be able to see through his disguise. Time passed as Leng Shiqi and Su Ji talked back and forth. When it was Su Ji's turn, the person on duty handed him a pen and said, "Write down your name, origin, cultivation, and who your master is." He waved the pen and wrote down his name, Leng Shiqi. Chapter 743. After writing down his name, Leng Shiqi then wrote down his cultivation, oneness of heaven and man. He did not plan to hide his cultivation, because he was aiming for the Flying Dragon list's rankings. Moreover, he also wanted to see how much strength he could show in his other identities other than those abilities that everyone was already familiar with. In addition, he had another ulterior motive. When the person in charge of registration saw the words, oneness of heaven and man, his hands suddenly trembled. His eyes widened and he quickly stood up. He thought it was an expert from some sect and wanted to flatter him. However, after he saw that Leng Shiqi was just a young man, his expression instantly became gloomy. Where did this brat come from? How dare he write nonsense about his cultivation? What nonsense! You're affecting other people's time. Believe it or not, I can ban you from registering right now. His loud noise immediately attracted the attention of many people. After all, waiting in line was a boring thing. A little excitement quickly attracted everyone's attention. Su Ji, who was standing behind Leng Shiqi, stretched his head out to take a look, and laughed. "I say, brother, your cultivation realm is too ridiculous. I think you're already a genius if you can reach the spiritual pulse realm at your age. The oneness of heaven and man is too exaggerated." He thought Leng Shiqi was joking. "Forget it. Since you're young and ignorant, quickly change it so as not to delay other people's time," the person who registered said impatiently. Leng Shiqi didn't speak. He stroked the long sword on his back. In an instant, a shocking sword cry resounded through the sky. The soaring sword intent stirred up the wind and clouds. All the spirit cultivators in front of the city lord's mansion painfully covered their ears. Even the entire Donglin city was affected. Several figures immediately rushed out of the city lord's mansion. They were all great masters of the oneness of heaven and man realm. Among them was City Lord Fengluan, whom Leng Shiqi had met when he came to participate in the elite meeting. Fengluan focused and said, "Who's the master here? Making a move in the city is too disrespectful to the city lord's mansion." At this moment, everyone's gaze turned towards Leng Shiqi. The few Unity of Heaven realms were extremely surprised when they saw how young Leng Shiqi was. Looking at Leng Shiqi's appearance, he seemed to be in his 20s. How could he reach the Unity of Heaven and man realm at such a young age? Even the strongest genius disciple of the four saint spiritual realms couldn't do this. However, the shocking sword intent on Leng Shiqi's body showed that he was in the Unity of Heaven and man realm. This could not be faked. It could be seen that the background of this black-clothed youth was definitely not simple. Leng Shiqi retracted his sword intent and said with a smile, "I am Leng Shiqi, and I have come from the East Sea to participate in the world's first Spirit Cultivator Conference. However, this mister doesn't believe in my cultivation, so I had no choice but to resort to this method. Please excuse me." The people who were extremely dissatisfied with Leng Shiqi were now dumbfounded and had yet to recover from their shock. Fengluan's eyes flashed with a hint of surprise. It's actually a young elite from overseas who has reached the unity of heaven and man realm at such a young age. This is the first time I've seen someone like you. Young friend Leng, you may not know this, but in Donglin County, anyone in the unity of heaven and man realm or the divine origin realm can directly enter the city lord's mansion to save their lives. There's no need to line up here. Young friend, please come in. That's good too. Leng Shiqi nodded. Just as he was about to enter the city lord's mansion with Feng Luan and the others, there was a commotion not far away. Leng Shiqi turned to look and saw a beautiful figure rushing out of the crowd. There were only a few people following behind her. She's trying to escape. Catch her. Tang Wanxiu, this is a good opportunity for you to gain fame for the Tang family. How dare you escape? Are you still a member of the Tang family? Don't forget that your mother is still living in the cottage in the back mountain. Even if you don't think for yourself, you should think for her. Tang Wanxiu. Leng Shiqi heard this name and felt that it was somewhat familiar. A thought flashed through his mind and he finally remembered that he had met this Tang Wanxiu twice. The first time was when he and Feng Sharmo destroyed the third-rate Golden Wing Academy. At that time, the Tang family's genius Tang Heimu and Tang Wanxiu accidentally broke in. In the end, Tang Heimu died at the hands of Leng Shiqi while Tang Wanxiu escaped. It was also because of this that Leng Shiqi was secretly wanted by the Tang family. The second time was in the illusory spirit's secret realm. They had joined hands to deal with the wraiths inside. Since then, they hadn't seen each other again. Now, Tang Wanxiu's cultivation was at the Spirit Aperture Realm middle stage and could even attempt to break through to the Spirit Aperture Realm late stage. This kind of cultivation progress was extremely rare even in the top sects, let alone the Tang family. This is strange. Leng Shiqi thought to himself. He clearly remembered that Tang Wanxiu broke through to the spiritual pulse realm by force with external objects, which was very similar to Su Ji's situation. It was reasonable to say that Tang Wanxiu's cultivation would stay at the spiritual pulse realm for the rest of her life. It was basically impossible for her to break through to the Spirit Aperture realm, let alone the Spirit Aperture realm middle stage. There was something strange about this. Leng Shiqi's eyes flashed. He suddenly remembered that when he was in the spiritual pulse realm and the Spirit Aperture realm, his cultivation progress was also very fast. The reason was that the spiritual pulse and the Spirit Aperture in his body had been opened long ago. And the person who opened these spiritual pulse and the Spirit Aperture was Meng Tianzong. The most powerful man 10,000 years ago, the ruthless man who sacrificed all the disciples of his sect in order to break through to the next realm. Leng Shiqi remembered that there used to be a phantom of Meng Tianzong in the spiritual space, but after he broke through to the Spirit Aperture realm, it disappeared inexplicably. Gradually, he forgot about this matter. Now that he saw Tang Wanxiu and thought of Oziu, a possibility suddenly appeared in his mind. That was whether the people who came out of the Phantom Spirit's secret realm alive in the end would all make rapid progress like them. If so, it meant that they had all been tampered with by Meng Tianzong. It was absolutely impossible for that crazy and ruthless person to bestow an opportunity to others for no reason. Perhaps he had other intentions. This made Leng Shiqi feel a little worried. At this time, when Tang Wanxiu heard the last sentence just now, her footsteps suddenly stopped, and then she smiled sadly. Since she was born, her fate had been led by the Tang family, and she had never had the slightest freedom. In the eyes of the Tang family, she, a girl born of a concubine, was at most a tool. In the past, in order to have a genius disciple in the spiritual pulse realm to act as a shield, the Tang family forced her to break through, which almost cut off her future of cultivation. Fortunately, she was not without a bit of luck. Since coming out of the Phantom Spirit's secret realm, she found that her cultivation was extremely fast, and even there were no bottlenecks between the small realms. Very quickly, she cultivated to the Spirit Aperture realm, but the Tang family still did not value her, and was even chased to the back of the mountain. It was not for anything else, but because she covered up the glory of the direct descendants. In the cultivation family, the concept was very important. Men were superior to women, and the difference between the direct descendants and the concubines was so strict. Now that the world's first spirit cultivator assembly had appeared, the Tang family thought that this was a good opportunity. Thinking of her as a concubine's daughter, they forced her to participate. However, Tang Wanqiu was very stubborn. Just now, when everyone was alarmed by Leng Shiqi's sword intent, she tried to escape, but she could not let go of her loved ones. In the end, she seemed to have accepted her fate and obediently walked back to the registration place. The people chasing her all sneered, mocking her one after another. Her face was ashen, as if she did not hear anything. Seeing this, Leng Shiqi was deep in thought, and he already had a plan in his heart. Chapter 744. This farce was nothing to Feng Luan and the other higher-ups. Feng Luan continued to invite Leng Shiqi into the city lord's mansion. It was only then that Su Ji, who was behind Leng Shiqi, recovered from his shock. He stammered, "Be brother, oh no, senior, why you're in the unity of heaven and man realm. The realm is nothing. I also want to thank brother Su for accompanying me for so long." Leng Shiqi said politely. He patted Su Ji's shoulder lightly, and then an extremely pure aura surged into Su Ji's body. In the blink of an eye, all of his spirit veins were cleansed. Su Ji's originally heterogeneous spirit energy was completely refreshed, making him feel so comfortable that he couldn't help but close his eyes. This also meant that the hidden dangers in his cultivation had been removed, and his future cultivation would be twice the result with half the effort. By the time Su Ji opened his eyes, Leng Shiqi had already entered the city lord residence. Leng Shiqi had a strange expression as he said, "I'm actually addressing a great expert at the union of heaven and man realm as brothers. I'm afraid I'm not dreaming, right?" When Leng Shiqi walked in, there were already more than 20 people sitting in the city lord's mansion. At a glance, these people were all in the unity of heaven and man realm. Such a lineup would be shocking outside, but in Leng Shiqi's eyes, it was nothing. After all, he had far more experts in the unity of heaven and man realm under his command. He looked around and found that 1/3 of the people in this group were wearing yellow and blue clothes. Upon closer inspection, there were 8 people. These 8 people were all from the top sect, the Mountain Sea sect. There were also 3 or 4 people from the Wu and Tang families, and one of them was an old acquaintance of Leng Shiqi. This person's name was Tang Haoqing, the Tang Haoqing who almost killed Leng Shiqi a few years ago in front of the Blood Cloak Pavilion branch. At that time, Tang Haoqing was still in the spirit astral realm, but now he had broken through to the unity of heaven and man realm. However, he was only in the early stage, and was at the bottom of the crowd. For him to participate in the world's first spirit cultivator assembly with such a cultivation, it must be out of helplessness. This also meant that the Tang family was indeed declining. When Leng Shiqi saw Tang Haoqing, a murderous intent flashed in his heart. This was the so-called enemies meet on a narrow road. In addition to these 3 forces, there were also a few rogue cultivators. As for the rest, they were experts from the Discipline Commission and the Dark Thunder Guards. As direct subordinates of the Thunderblaze dynasty, the experts of the Discipline Commission and the Dark Thunder Guards were naturally qualified to participate in the first Spirit Cultivator Conference. There were many spirit cultivator factions outside the sea, but the only ones that could truly be brought out were the 1 or 2 top factions from Falling Jade Island. It was impossible for such a monstrous genius to appear. This was nothing more than an excuse. However, it was not good for them to delve deeper. An imposing expert from the Mountain Sea sect stood up and said, "So it's an expert from outside the sea. Mountain Sea sect's Chang Feng Yu greets you." The others also began to exchange pleasantries. They all thought that Leng Shiqi's background was extraordinary, and there were only benefits and no disadvantages to befriending him. Moreover, they might soon become opponents, so it was not bad to take the opportunity to gather some information. Leng Shiqi could not avoid it. This time, his character was set to be kind and humble, so he could not break it. Soon, He gradually blended into the crowd, and at night, he even drank to his heart's content. After that, he lived in the city lord's mansion. Half a month later, the auditions were finally about to begin. On this day, Ling Shiqi and the other Unity of Heaven realm experts gathered again. The only difference was that the atmosphere was not as harmonious as before, because today was the day to announce their opponents for the first round. After half a month, a few more Unity of Heaven realm cultivators had signed up. Now, there were 32 people. In the end, only 10 of them would be able to go to the imperial capital, which meant 22 people would be eliminated. Moreover, these were all famous figures, so losing would be shameful. Thus, whether their opponents in the first round were strong or weak had a lot to do with it. Naturally, there were strong and weak people present. The strongest were undoubtedly Chang Feng Yu and the others from the Mountain Sea sect, as well as the Tang family's patriarch Tang Haoquang and sect master Wu of the 10 Absolutes, Huang Xiuan. These people were basically locked in one of the 10 spots. The weakest was obviously someone like Tang Haoqing, who had just broken through. Anyone who met him could be considered lucky. Feng Luan walked in and flicked his finger. Suddenly, 32 spirit lights of different colors shot out. Everyone is old acquaintances, so the rules of drawing lots are very simple. Those who draw the same color will be their opponents. There are 32 people in total, so we need the second round to determine 8 spots. As for the last 2 spots, they will be determined through the arena battles. The rules were indeed very simple. Everyone stared at the spirit lights in the air. With a thought from Feng Luan, the spirit lights began to rapidly spin without any pattern. After a few breaths, all the spirit lights scattered and landed in front of everyone. Ling Shiqi had a faint yellow spirit light in front of him, and another spirit light of the same color was in front of Tang Haoqing. On the second day, the world's first spirit cultivator assembly officially began. The competition rules for each cultivation realm were different. There were very few people in the realm of Unity of Heaven and Man. It was a one-on-one competition, but there were too many spirit cultivators below the 4th realm of Heaven and Man. There were tens of thousands of them. If they were to compete one by one, how long would it take? Therefore, the competition method used by the low-level spirit cultivators was very cruel, but it was also very efficient. This was the inspiration that Ling Shiqi received from the Blood Mist Island. It was to let tens of thousands of low-level spirit cultivators gather in the array and then kill each other regardless of friend or foe. Everyone had a token on them. In a life-and-death situation, as long as they took the initiative to crush the token, they could leave the array at any time. Of course, this also meant that they were eliminated. In the end, only the few people who remained were qualified to enter the competition. When the rules of the competition were announced, all the low-level spirit cultivators were stunned. Tens of thousands of people fighting, just thinking about it made them shudder. Even if they could leave by crushing the token, with so many spirit cultivators in the chaotic battle, it was still unknown whether they would have the chance to crush the token. Therefore, some people directly gave up on the spot. Ling Shiqi and the others did not know about this, because the competition venue of the Unity of Heaven and Man realm was hundreds of miles away from Donglin City. This was a barren mountain, and the surrounding 100 miles were sealed off. They were afraid that the battle between the Unity of Heaven and Man realm would be too terrifying and harm the innocent, so they chose this place. Feng Luan and the other experts of the City Lord Mansion were the judges. Everyone, we don't have many people, and the competition between the Unity of Heaven and Man realm is very rare. Let's start one by one. The others also tacitly agreed. After all, everyone was in the Unity of Heaven and Man realm, and the fight between each other was indeed worth watching. The first 2 opponents were a bit special, because these 2 people were from the top sect, Mountain Sea sect. This time, the Mountain Sea sect sent a total of 8 experts, which indeed showed the strength of the Mountain Sea sect, but also made the possibility of internal strife very high. Senior Brother Lu, the last time you and I fought was at the sect competition more than 20 years ago, right? That's right. That time, I was lucky to win. I hope junior brother Feng will do his best this time. The two of them tried peaceful means before resorting to force, and the others were watching them attentively. A green and white light flashed in Leng Shiqi's eyes. These two experts of the Mountain Sea sect had the same cultivation, which was the middle stage of the unity of heaven and man realm. Moreover, the cultivation method they practiced was the same, so to determine the winner, it depended on something other than cultivation and cultivation method. For example, spiritual weapons or some secret methods that one obtained through chance. Whoever had the advantage in this aspect had a greater chance of winning. Sure enough, the two of them were completely evenly matched at the beginning, and in the end, senior brother Lu won by relying on a defensive magical item. Junior brother Feng, thank you for letting me win. Senior brother Lu's skill is still better. I admit defeat. Feng Luan stood out and said, Lu Gaoi of the Mountain Sea sect wins. Next, Tang Haoqing of the Tang family will fight against Leng Shiqi, the overseas rogue cultivator. Hearing this, Leng Shiqi lifted his feet and his figure flashed out. He was a little surprised that it was his turn so soon, but it didn't matter. Tang Haoqing of the Tang family fiercely stomped on the ground, and with a loud bang, a pillar of fire shot up into the sky, causing him to fly high into the air. In the end, he crashed to the ground, creating a huge pit in the ground. Tang Haoqing's actions were naturally to show his strength, but in Leng Shiqi's eyes, Tang Haoqing's weakness of not being very proficient in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was exposed. Leng Shiqi pulled out the long sword on his back. It was actually a very ordinary fifth-stage spiritual sword. A great expert of the unity of heaven and man realm with a fifth-stage spiritual sword? It couldn't be so shabby. Or perhaps, he didn't put Tang Haoqing in his eyes? Tang Haoqing's expression suddenly became gloomy. He waved his fists, and raging flames bathed his body. The fire spiritual energy of heaven and earth became violent, and the temperature within a radius of dozens of miles rose sharply. Tang family, Tang Haoqing. Leng Shiqi lightly pointed his long sword, and his entire body instantly became like a sharp sword piercing through the sky. In his eyes, there was no heaven, no earth, no self, and no other. There was only the sword. Sect leader Wu of the 10 Absolutes, Huang Xiuan, immediately exclaimed, Sword Heart Illumination. Chapter 746. Hearing Huang Xiuan's shout, the rest of the people were shocked. The brilliant sword heart was a transcendent realm that sword cultivators pursued in their lives. It was not some kind of cultivation method or sword skill, but a state of mind that led to the ultimate sword path. This state of mind was extremely difficult to reach. Not to mention others, no one in Donglin County had reached this realm. Only those spirit cultivators who specialized in sword path might have a few. Those who had this state of mind were all sword path experts, and more than 80% of them were sky origin realm experts. Some people also said that spirit cultivators who could have the brilliant sword heart had almost paved the way to the sky origin realm. Everyone present was a great expert in the realm of unity of heaven and man. They were all famous figures in Donglin County, but for those in the realm of unity of heaven and man, their greatest desire was naturally the sky origin realm. Only by reaching the sky origin realm could one truly stand in the forest of the strong and look down on all living things. In this falling star continent, one could walk freely. Therefore, when Huang Xiuan shouted the words, Brilliant Sword Heart, everyone was so surprised. At the same time, there was some envy in their surprise. Leng Shiqi was already in the realm of unity of heaven and man at such a young age. This was already shocking enough. He had also comprehended the brilliant sword heart. In the future, he had a great chance of breaking through to the sky origin realm. At this moment, such a genius was standing in front of them, making everyone feel as if they had cultivated blindly for decades. Especially Chang Fengyu of the Mountain Sea sect, Tang Haoquang, and Huang Xiuan of the Tang family. They were the three most promising people to break through to the sky origin realm. Now that they saw Leng Shiqi was abnormally outstanding, their expressions became even more complicated. Moreover, no one questioned because Huang Xiuan, the sect leader of the Shiju sect, had also cultivated sword path. The brilliant sword heart was also the realm he wanted to reach, so it was impossible for him to be wrong. Lin Shiqi had shocked many experts before he even used his sword. In fact, he had obtained the brilliant sword heart a long time ago, but only recently did he know the power of the brilliant sword heart. A few years ago, when he was still on the Blood Mist Island, he had drawn the brilliant sword heart. However, at that time, he didn't feel anything and had long forgotten about it. Until recently, when Lin Shiqi practiced the 1,000 Illusion Sword Codex, he did not use his unlimited skill points, but he realized that his sword skills were progressing very quickly. At first, he thought it was because the 1,000 Illusionary Sword Codex was related to illusions. However, he decided to disguise himself as a disciple of the Wave Island Sword Monarch and began to cultivate the sword techniques left behind by him. Gradually, Lin Shiqi realized that every time he practiced sword skills, he would enter a mysterious state. It was in this state that he could comprehend sword skills so quickly. At that time, he suddenly remembered the enlightened sword heart. The strange thing was that he vaguely remembered that the brilliant sword heart was only a beginner prize. It shouldn't have such a strong effect. Later on, he thought about it again. Perhaps the brilliant sword heart was also a kind of talent that would only reveal itself when one came into contact with this field. Now that he was the disciple of the Wave Island Sword Monarch, he had to show off his sword skills. Since the enlightened sword heart had merged with Lin Shiqi, he naturally entered this state when he attacked. At this moment, the expression on Tang Haoqing's face turned ugly. Clearly, he was the one fighting with Lin Shiqi. Now, the fight hadn't even started yet, and Lin Shiqi had stolen all the limelight. However, he could also feel the pressure that Lin Shiqi was exerting on him. Lin Shiqi held his sword and did not make a move, but Tang Haoqing felt as if he was in a forest of swords, as if there were countless swords hidden everywhere. Tang Haoqing did not dare to be the slightest bit careless. His entire body was bathed in flames, and an incomparably thick broadsword appeared in his hand. The raging flames that filled the sky suddenly shrank, gradually turning into a dark red color, making him look a little demonic. Tang Haoquang, the patriarch of the Tang family, frowned. He's going all out. Dark red flames lingered on the huge broadsword. As Tang Haoqing slashed, a scorching and murderous aura suddenly soared into the sky. The broadsword light was tens of thousands of feet long. Lin Shiqi was still chuckling. He turned his long sword, and in an instant, everyone heard the sound of turbulent waves and even smelled a trace of the sea breeze. It was as if they had arrived on the boundless sea in the blink of an eye. The raging flames around Tang Haoqing were instantly suppressed to the extreme, and the sky-tearing broadsword light shrank by half. Lin Shiqi still did not attack, but he easily suppressed Tang Haoqing with his every move. This kind of strength inevitably made others secretly shocked. Huang Xiuan, the leader of the 10 Absolutes, murmured, that can't be sword intent forming a field, right? At this moment, Lin Shiqi finally attacked. With a point of his sword, raging waves surged into the sky, and strange phenomena appeared. There seemed to be an island looming in the raging waves, full of strangeness. Under the suppression of the raging waves, Tang Haoqing's broadsword light was on the verge of collapse. Tang Haoqing knew that things were not good. He looked at Tang Haoqing's painful appearance and sneered in his heart, but he said with an apologetic expression, "I am not very proficient in spiritual skill, so I did not stop for a moment. Please forgive me." Chapter 747. When Tang Haoqing heard Lin Shiqi's words, he was so angry that he couldn't help but spit out another mouthful of blood. He had already reached the unity of heaven and man realm and could control his own strength to the smallest detail. How could he not be able to hold back? This was clearly Lin Shiqi's intention. However, Lin Shiqi had spoken first, and Tang Haoqing was not as skilled as him. If he continued to pester him, it would only be more embarrassing. Thus, he wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and retreated into the crowd of the Tang family. The masters of the Tang family all looked at Leng Shiqi with unfriendly eyes. Tang Haoquang said coldly, "Tang Haoqing has already admitted defeat. Why are you still so heavy-handed? The Tang family doesn't care about other people's identities. We have nothing to fear." His words were aggressive, but in the ears of the others, they were disdainful. They knew that Tang Haoquang thought that Leng Shiqi was young and inexperienced, so he wanted to scare him to save Tang Haoqing's face. Leng Shiqi scratched his head embarrassedly and said with an innocent smile, "I really didn't do it on purpose. I didn't expect this person to be so weak." When he said this, the people of the Tang family suddenly turned pale. The other masters were also stunned. Especially when they saw Leng Shiqi's bright smile and the sincere tone he used to say those words. He gave people the impression that he was an innocent young man. However, those words made Tang Haoqing feel a little embarrassed. In this way, it made Leng Shiqi seem even more innocent. At this time, Feng Luan came out to smooth things over. "Young friend Leng, it's obvious that you haven't fought often. You still lack combat experience. It's understandable that you made a mistake." Tang Haoquang secretly took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, "Since City Lord Feng has spoken, this matter will be put aside for now. However, the Tang family will ask for an explanation sooner or later." Leng Shiqi said resentfully, "I misspoke." The members of the Tang clan remained silent with a cold expression. Feng Luan then said, "Next up is sect leader Wu Huang of the 10 Absolutes against Lin Yun of the Mountain Sea sect." The battle between those in the unity of heaven and man realm had to continue. Leng Shiqi once again became a spectator, but his mind was no longer focused on other people's battles. Instead, he was refining the plan in his heart. The plan to destroy the Tang family. When he injured Tang Haoqing just now, he had already done something to Tang Haoqing's body. As long as he was within 1,000 feet of Tang Haoqing, he could take his life at any time. Leng Shiqi had never forgotten Tang Haoqing's punch back then. He also admitted that he was a vengeful person, so when he decided to appear in the world as Leng Shiqi, the Tang family had been completely included in the list of people who must be killed. However, since the world's first spirit cultivator conference was taking place, it was not good for him to use his own power to forcefully destroy the Tang family. Otherwise, not only would it cause chaos, it would also arouse all sorts of suspicions. Leng Shiqi was now very powerful, and it would be easy for them to destroy the Tang family. However, because of his high position, his every move would be suspected by many people. Therefore, he was prepared to secretly kill the Tang family's strongest in the unity of heaven and man realm. As long as the Tang family did not have these great experts, there would be many forces that wanted to replace the Tang family. At that time, there would be no need for Leng Shiqi to make a move. The Tang family would naturally walk the path of destruction. Tang Haoqing was only the first. Tang Haoquang and the rest, who were standing not far away, would never know that their Tang family was already standing at the edge of a bottomless abyss. After about 2 hours, the first round of the battle ended. The battle between those in the unity of heaven and man realm caused quite a commotion, but everyone was not fighting to the death. Moreover, they were more familiar with each other, so it did not take long for the results to be known. There was not much time left. After the first round, there were only 16 people left. Among them, the Mountain Sea sect took up 5 people and still dominated one side. There were still 3 people from the 10 extremities, while the Tang family only had 2 people left. Among these 16 people, most of them were in the late stage of the unity of heaven and man realm. For example, Mountain Sea sect's Chang Fengyu, 10 extremities Wu, Huang Xiuan, and Tang Haoquang had even reached the peak of the unity of heaven and man realm. The second round was more difficult and exciting. Feng Luan stepped forward and said, "The second round will still be drawing lots. Everyone, do not move." Then, he shot out 16 rays of light like last time. This time, Leng Shiqi's opponent was actually Tang Haoquang. Leng Shiqi was also a little surprised. He did not secretly do anything. It was their bad luck to draw the Tang family one after another. However, Tang Haoqing secretly sneered, after giving Feng Luan such a big benefit, you must eliminate Ling Shiqi to relieve the hatred in my heart. Tang Haoquang said angrily, this person's identity is not simple. We can't really offend him. At most, we can make him a little embarrassed. Besides, even if I beat him, he still has a chance to fight for the last 2 spots. I don't care anymore. It's best to make him lose all face and face. Everyone did not have time to rest. They immediately started the second round of the battle. The strength of the opponents in the first few rounds was somewhat different, but there was not much suspense. The most interesting battle was the battle between Chang Fengyu and Huang Xiuan. One of them was an elder of a top sect, and the other was a first-rate sect leader. Their strength was about the same. Their battle showed the strength of the union of heaven and man realm. It was also the only battle that Ling Shiqi paid attention to. Chang Fengyu used the spiritual power of water and earth elements at the same time. The 2 elements that were originally incompatible with each other were mastered by him, and his power was immeasurable. Huang Xiuan was also an eccentric person. He had cultivated 2 types of weapons, the saber and the sword. Moreover, he had cultivated them to an extremely high level. He was also a veteran of the union of heaven and man realm. Back then, he comprehended the 5 ultimate saber techniques and the 5 ultimate sword techniques, which caused a sensation for a time. From then on, he led the 10 extremities Wu to become a first-rate force. Their battle could be said to be the most exciting and eye-catching of the day. At times, the mountains suppressed the world, and at other times, the sword light soared into the sky. In the end, they even fought with real fire. Everyone hurriedly worked together to set up restrictions so that they did not make too much noise. Otherwise, the small mountain would have been razed to the ground. In the end, Huang Xiuan was slightly better and defeated Chang Fengyu. Ling Shiqi had also gained a little. He himself had also cultivated the saber, sword, and earth attribute cultivation techniques. From the exchange of blows between the 2 of them, he could see some tricks. As long as he could comprehend them, his strength would improve again. Unfortunately, this kind of battle between experts at the peak of the union of heaven and man realm was too rare. After one battle, it was Ling Shiqi's turn until the last battle. However, everyone thought that there was no suspense in this battle. Not long ago, Ling Shiqi's strength was indeed very strong, but that was compared to the early and middle stages of the union of heaven and man realm. His opponent at this moment, Tang Haoquang, was also at the peak of the union of heaven and man realm. He was a powerful existence who had the chance to break through to the Tianyuan realm. Just based on the cultivation realm, he could crush Ling Shiqi. Tang Haoquang stretched out his hand to Ling Shiqi and said, please. Ling Shiqi showed his white teeth and smiled, please. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.